Hello there, and welcome back to the next part of All the Young Dudes. This part will cover chapters 91 through 100. Chapter 91, 5th year, the week following. Anyone who ever had a heart wouldn't turn around and break it, and anyone who ever played a part wouldn't turn around and hate it. Sunday the 13th of June, 1976. Everything hurts was Remus's first thought upon waking. The next thought was, where are they? No one had ever come. It was warm, too warm for June, and his heart would not stop pounding with the remnants of the wolf's frustration. He clambered to his feet and staggered to the bed, dripping blood. It was supposed to have been their final hurrah, he thought miserably. They were supposed to chase unicorns. What had happened? At once he began to worry. Something awful must have taken place, something really terrible, for none of the Marauders to come at all. Any one of them on their own might have been able to sit with him, at least just keep him company, even Wormtail. "Good morning, dear." Madame Pumphrey entered the room quickly. She was more nervous than usual. He could smell it on her. Something had happened, only he couldn't ask what, could he? "Oh, you poor thing, it's been a bit of a night all round, eh?" She began to heal his most pressing wounds. "What do you mean, all round?" he asked, trying not to sound too anxious. "Oh, nothing, dear, nothing to worry about at all." In the hospital wing he would have tried to stay awake, but Madame Pumphrey stood over him to make sure he finished his sleeping draught, and he was out like a light. "Remus? Psst, you awake?" Remus opened his eyes, bleary and irritated, to see the fuzzy image of James float into view. Just James's head. "Prongs?" he croaked. "Shh!" James murmured, barely moving his lips. "Pumphrey won't let anyone in to see you. Had to sneak in under the cloak. You okay?" "Not really." He could feel the new scars already without moving. "What happened? You didn't come?" His friend had an unfamiliar expression. Unfamiliar in James's features anyway. Was it shame? "I'm really sorry, Mooney." "Why? What happened?" Remus asked again, his voice hardening. "I can't remember anything." "It was... Godric, I don't know how to tell you." "Try. Where was Sirius? Why wasn't he here?" Remus wanted to scream it. "Look, please don't be too angry with him, okay? He's an idiot, a bloody stupid idiot. But I don't think he realized. I don't think he meant—" Ah, it dawned on Remus all too quickly. "James, what did Sirius do?" James had never once been dishonest for as long as Remus had known him. And yet, as the story poured out of him, it was still tempered with little white lies. Whether they were meant to protect Remus or Sirius, it wasn't clear. Sirius hadn't been thinking. He had been reckless. He hadn't meant any harm. But he had caused a great deal of harm, whether he meant to or not, and might have been responsible for much more. "He told Snape," Remus said, trying to get a grip on the situation, feeling a horrible, sick, prickly sensation beginning in his stomach and creeping upwards. Not exactly," James blinked, wetting his lips. "He told him how the willow worked, and Snape... You know what Snape's like. I know what Sirius is like." James nodded as if accepting that this was fair enough. "No one got hurt. Sirius bottled it at the last minute and told me I managed to stop Snape from getting too close, but he saw me." Remus thought he might be sick. There was a terrible roaring inside his ears, as if he was falling into a dark pit, a desperate canyon. He closed his eyes. "Can you go away, please, James?" "And we would have come, me and Pete, we would have. But Snape went to Dumbledore, and you were so riled up." "James, I want you to go," he hissed, closing his eyes. "But Mooney, please." "Okay, mate, okay, but I'll be back." Remus said nothing, did not even open his eyes again until he heard the curtain rustling and knew he was alone. Eventually, Madame Pumphrey poked her head around the corner. "Hello, dear," she said softly. "I've got another sleeping potion here. Now I know you don't want it, but give it here." He reached out an aching arm at once. Anything to make it all go away. Anything which meant he would not have to think anymore. He ought to have seen something like this coming, even if James hadn't. Sirius had been in freefall since Christmas. It had just been a matter of who he would crush when he finally landed. Monday the 14th of June, 1976. Remus Lupin would never ever forgive Sirius Black. It was a decision he made almost the very instant he woke up the second time after that terrible moon. The weight of it all came crashing down on him, and he felt a rage so pure it burnt like a fever. This is how betrayal feels. He had not been angry like that in a very long time. At the end of his 4th year, Remus had quietly made a choice to lower his defences, to soften and relax, at least around his friends. Keeping everyone at a distance, keeping everyone slightly afraid of you, had proved too exhausting to keep up for very long. But now, Remus found it very easy indeed. He barely spoke to Madame Pomfrey except to demand to be allowed an extra few nights in the hospital wing. Really, Remus, rest is important, but staying in bed all day isn't healthy. You need exercise. I don't feel well, he would repeat from under the covers. It was childish, but she let him be childish. She knew what had happened. She felt sorry for him. The nurse tutted and signed him in for another night. Dumbledore was the worst, the bringer of bad news as always. He had arrived the evening after it happened to offer his own useless perspective on the situation. Remus sat up in bed, arms crossed, unflinching and unmoving. "Mr. Snape has calmed down considerably, you may be pleased to hear." Dumbledore said, "He certainly had a fright, but he has been persuaded to act in the best interests of his school and his fellow pupils." Remus snorted at this. Dumbledore did not react. "So no harm done. Your friend, Mr. Black—" "Not my friend," Remus said without looking at Dumbledore. He stared forward. "Remus, is he expelled?" "No." Dumbledore said quietly, "What Sirius did was incredibly foolish, incredibly dangerous, but it was a mistake. I have no doubt that he is truly repentant. He has learnt a valuable lesson here." "Oh, brilliant!" Remus snorted again, tightening his arms as if they were all that kept him together. "As long as the Black Heir has learnt a good moral lesson, as long as it's benefited his personal development, Remus, as long as we can all look back on this and think, what an excellent parable. Thank goodness we all know now exactly what happens when you send your enemy after a deadly fucking monster. Remus!" He stopped, his face hot, and finally looked at Dumbledore. Cool, forget-me-not blue eyes stared back at him. Remus was reminded of their first meeting. He'd been rude then too, and angry. "You have every right to feel what you are feeling," Dumbledore said, calm as ever, "and rest assured Sirius will be punished." Remus wanted to mumble something sarcastic about the effectiveness of detentions when it came to Sirius Black. He didn't. Dumbledore continued, "I will caution you now, as I did once before, when a childish prank got out of hand. Passion is an important quality, but we must all learn to exercise control." "Bit late for that." "You've been horribly let down by somebody close to you, and I'm very sorry, but you cannot let this incident—" "People close to me have been letting me down since I was 5, Remus said bitterly. "I'm used to it. Anyway," he hunched down in his bed, wishing Dumbledore would go away and leave him in peace. "We weren't that close." "That's a pity," Dumbledore replied. He stood up. "Because we will all need each other more than ever, soon enough. Forgive and forget, Remus." Remus did not say goodbye. He just rolled back over and tried to sleep. Madame Pomfrey would not let him stay for 3 nights in a row. He went straight to Professor McGonagall instead. He knocked twice on the door, then barged straight in. "Remus, are you quite well?" "Send me back." "Excuse me?" His head of house stood up from where she'd been sitting behind her desk. "Send me back," he repeated, clenched fists. "To St. Edmund's S, exams are finished. I don't need to be here." "Remus, the term is not finished. Unless you are unwell, I cannot send you anywhere." "So I'm a prisoner?" "Of course not, you silly boy. Sit down." He thought about refusing or even storming straight back out again, but she was so stern, and something drilled into him at an early age forced him to obey the raised voices of older women. She sat too, the colour in her face going down. She swished her wand and a kettle appeared, along with 2 cups and saucers. "Tea, Mr. Lupin?" "No, thanks." "Come along now," she tutted, pouring him a cup anyway. "I find that most unpleasant conversations can be made easier with the right refreshments. Help yourself to a biscuit." She nodded to a plate which had not been there a moment before. "I'm fine. I just want to go," he said, his voice as level as he could keep it. Yes, that much has been made clear. She sipped her tea. But I'm not going to send you back to St. Edmund's, S. Tell Madame Pumphrey to let me sleep in the hospital wing, then. I shall do no such thing. You have a perfectly good bed in Gryffindor Tower. I can't go there. Gryffindors do not run away from our problems, Mr. Lupin. Yeah, but Slytherins run away from werewolves. He spat. He looked at her, fixing her with a glare he thought he had almost perfected now. I would have been arrested, sent to Azkaban, or put down. I wouldn't even know I'd done anything, and it's all his fault. Oh no, he had to stop there. He was in quite serious danger of bursting into tears, and that could not happen. Under no circumstances was Remus going to cry over this. McGonagall was kind and waited for him to compose himself. He took a few short breaths, letting his curls fall in front of his face, before finally he was able to meet her eye again. I can't sleep in a room with the person who did that. That is perfectly reasonable, she said gently. He blinked. What? I'm not completely heartless, Mr. Lupin, she smiled. Believe me, I know how you must feel. I can imagine, at least. And I can tell you, I've had serious words with Mr. Black myself. He's off the Quidditch team, detention for the rest of the year, 100 points lost. But we cannot make any drastic changes to your sleeping arrangements, not without anyone asking why. It clicked. For the past few days, Remus had placed his pain at the centre of the universe. He had forgotten that no one else in the school knew a thing. Oh, was all he could muster. I'm sorry, Remus, McGonagall said. It's a horrendous cruelty, but it must be borne. That reminds me. He fished in his pocket for his prefect's badge. He'd broken the transfiguration spell on it and wrapped it in tissue paper, but it still felt hot in his hand. He placed it on the desk. Take that back. Give it to, I don't know. Give it to James. I can't do it any more. Remus, McGonagall sounded sad now, pleading. Don't let this set you back. Talk to your friends. He shrugged. Can I go? He went to the library. Where else? It would be simple enough for the Marauders to find him if they wanted to, but then they had the map too. There was nowhere to hide, except maybe the Shrieking Shack, and Remus would be damned if he ever spent longer in there than absolutely necessary. Fortunately, everyone else seemed to be outside enjoying the early summer sunshine, leaving the library pretty much empty. He read, or tried to anyway. It wasn't easy to concentrate when his own brain kept interrupting. Should never have snogged him. Look, piss off, I'm not in the mood. Oh, charming, you're the one who keeps trying to chat. I want to talk to Grant, not you. You're a shit substitute. Well, you've got to ask yourself what that says about you, Donsha. Find someone real to chat to if you're so keen. What's it got to do with the kiss? Ooh, it's a kiss now, is it? Snogging's good enough for Grant, but for the great and glorious Sirius Black, it's kissing la-dee-da. Either be helpful or leave me alone. I told you, or the real Grant told you, not to kiss him. You thought you got off easy when he decided to ignore it, but now you're paying. You're saying I did this. It's what it sounds like. That's not very kind. Was I supposed to be? I miss Grant. Tough luck. Eventually, it began to get dark. He missed dinner. He didn't think he could bring himself to eat in front of the Marauders anyway. He just waited. It was only 2 weeks to go until term ended. He could avoid them that long. He had done it before. Stay in the library, get up early, go to bed late, piece of cake. He was chased out of the library at 9 o'clock and, starving hungry by now, took a detour to the kitchens. The house elves there were only too happy to serve, building a plate of sandwiches, crisps and sweets, enough to feed a whole classroom. Remus scoffed the lot and could have asked for seconds. But it was time to bite the bullet. He walked slowly, as if that might help, and was waylaid by Lily on prefect patrol. Hiya, she smiled. Feeling better? Yeah, much, he nodded. How are you? She looked down, fiddled with her hair. Oh, you know, fine. Sev's stopped lurking outside the common room now, at least. Sorry about all of that. It wasn't your fault, she waved a hand. I really thought that... Oh, it's stupid. But I thought that maybe one day he'd change his mind about all of that pure-blood nonsense. And when he did, I'd still be there. Like all I had to do was just keep being his friend, and everything would just work out for the best. Stupid, she shook her head. Not that stupid. He replied because it seemed like a nice thing to say. Yeah, well, could have saved myself a lot of heartache. She shrugged stoically. What are you doing wandering around anyway? Go to bed. You've not been well. He smiled at her. He hadn't smiled for ages. He was about to turn and keep going when something made him change his mind. He bent down and wrapped his arms around Lily, squeezing her. She hugged back, which only made him grip harder, until he had lifted her off her feet and she squealed, laughing. God, you're stronger than you look, Lupin. Sorry, he blushed, setting her down. No, it was nice. She smiled up at him, patting his shoulder. You okay? Yeah, he didn't feel okay entering the common room. Fortunately, it was very quiet. Some students still had exams, others were wiped out after a long day in the hot sun. The Marauders were not there, but they had been recently. Remus knew exactly what he was going to do. It had fallen into place in the library as he mulled over the first confrontation like a play he had to rehearse. He went up the stairs. It was silly, he knew, but ever since his birthday he had lingered, just for a second, on that one step in the staircase every time he went up to bed or down for breakfast. This castle kept memories. The Marauders' map had taught him that much, and that step had held Remus's sweetest memory of all. He stepped over it now, resolute. He pushed the door open with some force, startling the three boys inside. They were sitting on their beds. Peter was in his pyjamas, looking glum. Remus could only assume that meant no change with Desdemona. James was half undressed, rattling around in his bedside cabinet for something. Sirius was reclining, clearly about to make a sarcastic comment. When Remus entered, he sat up straight. Remus walked straight to his own bed and picked up his pyjamas. He did not speak, but went straight for the bathroom, which he locked, then cast a silencing spell over. He didn't want to hear them. He wasn't sure how he'd react to it. He washed. He brushed his teeth. He put on his night things. Remus was more than aware that he lost some of his authority when dressed in a pair of baggy blue and white pyjama bottoms and a greying vest, but he had quite a few new scars and didn't want to undress in front of them. He took a deep breath. He walked out, crossing quickly to his bed. "Mooney, Sirius started. Remus ignored him and turned to James. "Thank you for stopping Severus, James," he said, emotionlessly. "You saved both our lives." James started, but Remus had climbed into bed and closed his curtains with a flick. Well, he thought to himself, that's that then. Chapter 92, 5th Year, Closing, Tuesday the 30th of June, 1976. "I'm sorry," said Sirius Black, with big, anxious eyes, standing behind Remus as he brushed his teeth. "I'm sorry," murmured Sirius Black, low over the breakfast table, before Mary had arrived. "I'm sorry," pleaded Sirius Black, as Remus walked away again. "I'm sorry," whispered Sirius Black, as Remus closed his bed curtains every night. "So let him suffer," said the cruelest part of Remus, the part that had been hurt the most. He turned his head, he walked away, he closed doors and he shut his eyes. "Sorry isn't good enough," he said with every action. "I don't know what is." James and Peter watched cautiously out of the corners of their eyes. They knew not to get involved, though James undoubtedly bore the brunt of Sirius's distress. The late-night meetings had returned with a vengeance. The girls noticed that something was wrong, but they weren't sure what. Lily thought he was nervous about going back to St. Edmund's S. Marlene thought he was worrying about OWL results. Remus went along with both notions gratefully. After all, he was doing everything he could bear to act as normally as possible. He joined the Marauders for meals. He sat in his usual place. He read his books. He played chess with Peter, gobstones with James. In the evenings, he climbed the stairs to bed. But he did not speak to Sirius. For the remaining 2 weeks of June, Remus didn't say so much as a word in his direction. He didn't even look at him if he could help it. He had the feeling after the first week that perhaps James didn't completely approve of this. Potter was furious on Remus's behalf, of course, at least in the facts of the matter, but James could be very blind when it came to Sirius's less excusable flaws. James would have forgiven him after the first apology. Maybe Remus was a weaker man, but he wouldn't be weak anymore. He needed to get back to who he really was. We can all learn our lesson. Remus had tried being soft and open, like all of his rich, well-bred friends. Where had it got him? He'd gone and fallen in love with his best friend and almost got himself killed. He was ashamed of himself, mooning over Sirius like that. Mooney's mooning. Sirius would find that hilarious. So he started avoiding James and Peter too. He stopped going to lessons, that was the first thing. There weren't many to go to, of course, with the last exams taking place and the whole school falling into summer holiday mode. Still, he had introductory newt classes penciled into his timetable in almost every subject except potions. He couldn't wait to be rid of potions. The greenhouses were a good place to hide out. Remus found by the end of the year that he had spent nearly all of his carefully saved cash on cigarettes and weed. He told himself that was okay. Told himself he wouldn't need money to find and destroy Greyback, just the right scent and a full moon. Not that he thought about Greyback much. He tried not to think about anything for too long. Anger gave way to a numbness, which seemed easier to live with. When he couldn't be outside, he went to the library and pretended to read. Students from his study group stopped by occasionally, but he always found a reason to leave as soon as possible. "Hiya, Remus," Christopher popped out from between the stacks one afternoon. "Glad I caught you. Can you recommend some summer reading? I'll be doing my owls next year." "What?" Remus frowned groggily. He'd been just nodding off and was annoyed at having been woken. He was sleeping a lot lately, but never seemed to feel refreshed. "Oh, God, I dunno. They send you a book list." "Yeah, but I thought you might have some good tips," Christopher continued, relentlessly cheerful. "Especially in history. What did you do your final essay on?" The Goblin Revolt." He shifted, trying to settle back onto his elbows. "Cool. Hey, maybe I could write to you over the summer? We can swap notes and—" "Look, Christopher, don't take this the wrong way, but could you please fuck off?" He would feel guilty about it later, but at least the annoyance went away. The Marauders never tried to find him, as far as he knew. He had taken the map the first chance he had and kept it in his pocket at all times. This had the added benefit of helping him keep out of Snape's. The only thing Remus wanted to avoid more than his rage at Sirius was his utter terror at the thought of running into Severus. Snape had hated Remus before all of this. He was too close to Lily. He was friends with James. He had been responsible for coming up with at least half of the pranks on Slytherin. Since the incident, this obsession seemed to have deepened. He was still whispering at mealtimes, staring at Remus all the while with a fresh kind of hatred that Remus could see would run and run. If Sirius had learnt a lesson from that awful night, then Remus certain that Snape had not. Sirius was all too keen. He apologized over and over. He never tried to explain himself, which was good, because if he had given an excuse, Remus didn't think he could control himself. It already took every ounce of nerve not to leap across the table, or the bedroom, or the common room, and shake and punch and scream at Sirius. "You bastard, you bastard, you bastard!" The apologies he could cope with. Background noise. He didn't rise to the bait. Not that he didn't have things to say, not that he didn't replay the monologue over and over, editing and perfecting until it was a great stream of miserable defeat, circling his head, fueling his mood. "Sorry isn't good enough. Your guilt isn't good enough. I need you to feel it too. I trusted you. I trusted you with every last secret. I offered you every piece of me. What else have I got now? I could kill you. I could bash your teeth in so you choke on them. I could wrap my hands around your throat and squeeze. I could rip you to pieces. I could kiss you, you fucking bastard." In his dreams, Remus said these things and more. And always in his dreams, Sirius stared back at him with calm contrition as he removed his clothes and pulled Remus towards him. It appeared that betrayal was not enough to kill desire, though it made hiding it easier. By the time that wretched summer term ended, the only person Remus despised more than Sirius was himself, for continuing to love him just the same. "Hello," Lily said gently, poking her head around the carriage door. "Wondered where you'd got to." Remus grunted, a small noise which was neither friendly nor rude. Lily came inside. "What are you doing here? All alone?" Remus shrugged, sucking his cigarette like it was keeping him alive. He hunched down in his seat as she took the place opposite. "Too crowded in there," he said by way of explanation. "Know how you feel." She replied, "McGonagall told me you've given up being a prefect." "Yep." He finished his cigarette. He lit another. "Shame. You were good at it." "Liar," he smirked. Her face lit up too. "Yeah, okay, you were rubbish, but I'll miss you on my rounds." She let this hang in the air for a moment before frowning again. "Remus, whatever's going on with you and the other boys, I hope it gets better. You seem so miserable." "I'm fine. Black's off the Quidditch team." "Is he? What did he do?" "Leave it, Evans. Just go away. You know, you can talk to me. I know how it feels to be let down by a friend." "How is Snivelus?" Remus snarled. He wished he could tell her that it wasn't her fault, that he couldn't help acting like a prick, that if he didn't act this way, then he wasn't really sure how to act at all. Well, I'm still not talking to him, as you know. He keeps trying, though. He had some pretty mad stories, actually, about you." Remus looked at her finally. She looked nervous, her hands twisting in her lap. She looked a bit scared of him, actually. "I don't believe them," she said suddenly. "Don't you?" He raised an eyebrow. He should have known this was coming. "I mean, just because well, you do have a lot of scars. Sorry, and you do get ill quite a lot, but that doesn't mean—" "I hadn't really thought about it. Maybe it's just a weird coincidence. Sev has always been a bit paranoid. And—" He could have watched her squirm like that for ages, tangling herself up in apologies and unasked questions. But why bother? He could be reckless too. "Lily," he said gently, stubbing out his last cigarette, "you can't tell anybody." She stopped blathering and stared at him. He saw her big green eyes widen even more, the look of surprise on her face so comical he could cry. Her breath hitched, then she nodded, resolute and quite serious. "I won't," she said. "Promise." Chapter 93, Summer 1976, Part 1, London. Just a perfect day. Problems all left alone. Weekenders on our own. It's such fun. Just a perfect day. You made me forget myself. I thought I was someone else. Someone good. Wednesday the 11th of August, 1976. St. Edmund's was less bearable than usual that summer. Remus was angry almost all of the time. It was too hot, and he missed Hogwarts, and he missed his friends, and most of all he missed Sirius. But he also hated him. It was a huge mess. He missed Grant too. Grant, who might have made it all a bit more manageable, or at least offered some escapism. But, as an unsatisfying conversation with another St. Eddie's boy called Mike had told him, Grant had left St. Edmund's shortly after Christmas. He was living in a flat in Mile End, apparently, though Remus didn't have much more information than that, and he had said Remus could come any time. "At least I'm not knocking over off licenses or getting pissed on the common this time," he thought, as he planned his escape. As summer rebellions went, this one was perhaps the most healthy. He waited until the second full moon of the summer had passed on the 10th of August. On the 11th, he waited for Madame Pumphrey to come and give him the all clear, and then he just left. He was sore and extremely tired, but at the time he didn't feel he had any other option. He packed a small bag without taking books or homework or his wand or anything at all that reminded him of Hogwarts. He would be a muggle for a few days. Why not? All Remus had to do was walk out into the garden and crawl through the fence at the back, just as he had been doing for years to get into town. From there, he simply walked to the nearest tube. Thaydon Boys' underground station was about 5 miles away, but he did it easily in under 2 hours, even with a gammy hip. He couldn't afford a ticket, but it wasn't difficult to push through the barriers behind a group of suited businessmen on their way to work. He got a seat on the train and pretended to be asleep so that the ticket inspector wouldn't bother him, listening to the rattling, rumbling roar of the train as the carriage whooshed along the tracks like a great earthworm ploughing its way into central London. Excitement pulsed in Remus's chest as he reached Mile End, where he hurried out of the carriage into the dimly lit green and white tiled station. Mile End had been hit by a German bomb during the war and still hadn't recovered from the shock of it. It was a dirty, sprawling mess of a high street, littered with rubble and newspapers, children playing in the road, noise everywhere. The grim anonymity suited Remus. Who would come looking for him here? Who would find him? He wandered for a bit, unsure what to do next. The information he'd been given was just a building name, no street address. But after asking in a newsagent and quite literally following his nose, he found it. It turned out that Grant didn't actually have a flat, not in the sense that he owned it or was even renting it. As far as Remus could tell, it was a squat, shared with several other young men and women. He hadn't actually been expecting Remus either. "Bloody hell!" he exclaimed when one of the girls finally brought him to the door. "What are you doing here?" Remus felt very foolish. He wasn't sure what sort of welcome he would have liked, but it wasn't that. "You did say I could visit." "Yeah, sorry." Grant grabbed his shoulder and pulled him inside. "Sorry, I'm just a bit ungovver. Give me a minute." He led Remus into what appeared to be a kitchen. It smelled vaguely of curry and damp. There were bubbles in the wallpaper and holes in the yellow linoleum floor. Grant flicked on an electric kettle. "One of the girls sorted us out with a generator," he explained. "She's a mechanic or something. Tea?" Remus nodded. Tea usually helped. Grant looked different. Only a year older than the last time Remus had seen him, he was thinner about the face. He'd lost some of the brightness in his eyes, and his blonde hair was even longer, still curly, but badly in need of washing. He seemed to have chipped a tooth at some point as well, and a bruise the colour of old honey marred his left cheek. Even so, he still had the same friendly grin. He handed Remus a steaming mug and smiled at him. "You look, well, like shit," he said, sipping from his own mug. "Been sleeping rough?" "Oh, no," Remus shook his head. "I just got off the tube from St. Edmunds's." "Oh, yeah, how's Matron? Kick you out, did she? Kicked me out, the old trollop?" "Nothing like that," Remus said. "I just thought I'd visit, see how you were." "Mike tell you where I was?" "Yeah, so who is Mike?" Remus smiled at him shyly from behind his mug of tea. "Oh, you know," Grant smirked. "Just some company for me. Couldn't pine over you all year, could I, posh boy?" "He's really thick." "Is he?" Grant looked mildly amused. "I never noticed. Didn't really talk much." Remus snorted at this, and it felt good. Grant made him feel so normal. He could never comfortably joke about that sort of thing with the Marauders, even when they were all on speaking terms. The squat was cleaner than it first appeared, but still in a pretty bad state. There were 6 of them living there, between 2 bedrooms and a living room, which was visible through a beaded doorway across the hall. Apparently one of the boys even slept in the bathroom, because none of the plumbing was connected anyway. The only working tap was in the kitchen. "There's a loo in the courtyard," Grant explained. "Sometimes we can get in to use the showers at the boxing club next door." "Oi, oi!" Another young man had woken up from his spot on the sofa. "Make us a cuppa, Grant, darling. Who's this?" He was shirtless, dark-skinned and gorgeous. He had the same faraway look Grant had now. "Mate of mine from the children's home," Grant said. "Remus Lupin." "That's never your name." The stranger gawped at him. "Straight up," Grant replied on Remus's behalf. "Goes to a posh school and everything, innit? Remus, this is Ads." "Blimey!" Ads stared at Remus, then back at Grant. "He one of us?" Grant handed Ads a third mug of tea and surveyed Remus, looking him up and down appraisingly. He nodded very slightly. Remus wasn't sure what that meant, but he had some idea. He stifled a yawn. Grant clucked sympathetically. "You look dead on your feet," he said. "Had one of your nights, have you? Go and lie down if you want. I'll kick 'em all out of the bedroom. No one'll bother you." Remus nodded gratefully and was led into a dark and dingy room. "Oi, you lazy gits, up you get. Got a mate here who needs a kip?" Remus murmured an embarrassed apology to the 4 young men who clambered to their feet and milled out of the room. The beds seemed to be used on a rotating basis, and no one looked annoyed by this intrusion. One of the boys even winked at Remus. 3 sad single mattresses lay on the floor, strewn with old blankets and pillows. It smelt vaguely of mould and strongly of unwashed bodies. Cardboard had been used to stop up the broken windows. Remus was glad it was the summer. It might have been freezing cold otherwise. Despite it all, he slept easily, feeling that he had finally taken some control over his situation. Grant woke him some hours later. He looked a little bit better, as if he'd had a good meal at least. Remus's stomach rumbled. "Wakey, wakey," Grant chirped, holding another mug of tea. Remus sat up, rubbing his eyes. Some of the soreness left over from the full moon was still there, but he felt better. It must have been midday, judging by the blazing rays of light coming through the gaps in the cardboard. "Thanks," he rasped, sipping the tea, moving along so that Grant could sit beside him. They sat in companionable silence for a little while, backs against the wall and legs splayed out in front of them. "So," Grant said finally, once he had judged Remus sufficiently awake and half the tea was drunk. "Want to tell me why you're here?" Remus shrugged. "Just visiting. Sick of that place." "Yeah, well, I know that feeling." Grant sighed. "Ain't you going back to school in a few weeks, though?" "Yeah, maybe." He knew he had to. There was nowhere else to go. "Sick of that place too, eh?" Grant nudged him, gently teasing. "Go on, tell us what happened. Get your heart broken?" Remus looked at him, startled. Grant chuckled. "Yeah, thought so. Who is he then?" "It's not," Remus stuttered. "It's not that. It's complicated. My friend just let me down." "Yeah, they always do." Grant nodded sagely. "Bet they're the worst for it, public school boys, eh? Especially with us peasants." "It wasn't like that at all." Yeah. He waved a dismissive hand. "Tell yourself you're different if you like. Stay away from toffs if you want my advice. We're just a bit of fun to them. Keep to your own kind." "This isn't about class," Remus said angrily. Grant glanced down at him, sympathetically, as if he was much older and wiser. "Have a look around, Remus," he said, gesturing to the dank room they were in. "We're British. It's always about class." Remus looked down at his chipped mug of greyish tea. Grant was probably right. What else was this stupid war all about? He felt he ought to say something else, something witty or clever. He stared at the tea and just felt sad. He might lose it if he spoke. Grant set his own mug down on the wooden floor and touched Remus's hand. "You're going to be okay. It stops hurting after a while." No, it was no good. Remus had lost it. He sniffed a few times, trying harder than ever not to cry, but the tears came and he was too tired. Grant put an arm around him, and Remus leaned on his shoulder, sobbing softly, hiccuping every now and then like a little child. Grant kissed his head softly and whispered into his hair, "Ain't no shame in it," which only made him cry harder. It was a good thing, maybe. Once he'd finally calmed down, he felt like he'd had a good, long sleep. He wiped his nose on his sleeve and straightened up, looking for something else to talk about. "Is everyone here, you know?" he asked shyly. "Queer, yeah, most of us. Nowhere else to go. Coppers leave us alone if we leave them alone." "Police, but it isn't a crime." "Is for someone your age?" Grant raised an eyebrow. "Age of consent is 21 for us deviants." "Oh, right, yeah, but I wasn't going to—" Grant laughed and ruffled Remus's hair. "You staying the night? Lot of us are off to this pub up in Soho. It's safe enough." "Can I stay then? Just for a bit?" "Don't see why not. Come on you, let's get you fed." He hauled himself to his feet, looking thinner than ever in his spindly drainpipe jeans. He offered Remus a hand and pulled him up too. Lunch was baked beans on toast. The bread was a bit mouldy, but they scraped off the greenest bits. Afterwards they sat about in the living room with some of Grant's housemates and smoked pot, with Bob Dylan playing in the background. Everything felt distinctly muggleish, and Remus was glad of it. It was so simple. No one knew him except Grant, who hardly knew him well. It could be very easy to disappear if you wanted to, Remus thought to himself. After a few deep drags on the spliff, Remus found himself lying on the slightly damp beige carpet, staring up at the tobacco-stained ceiling. Grant gently placed a cushion under his head. He was being so kind, like an older brother, even though they were practically the same age and only a year ago had been all over each other. If Remus was being fully honest with himself, he had come prepared for more of the same, but was eternally grateful that Grant never so much as hinted in that direction. "Fucking dog keeps barking," someone said in the background, bringing Remus slowly out of his dreamy state. "What is it, a stray?" someone else asked. "Dunno, bloody massive though. Horrible black thing." "Did you say there's a black dog outside?" Remus sat up slowly, a sinking feeling in his belly. It couldn't be, surely. "Yeah," Ads replied, standing at the window. Remus stood up and went over to join him. Sure enough, there it was. He stepped back quickly behind the curtain so Sirius wouldn't see him. How far could dogs see? I need the loo, just a minute, Remus muttered, exiting the flat quickly. He hurried down the stairs and took the door out to the courtyard, where he stood at the threshold, watching the huge black dog still barking up at the window. "Hello, Sirius," he said quietly. The dog turned and was quiet at once. "James with you?" "Hiya, Mooney." James stepped out from behind some bins. "Lovely place you've got here." "Look, I'm not in the mood." Remus folded his arms. He felt a bit light-headed from the dope. "What do you want?" Sirius had not transformed back, but sat there watching him. Good. That made it easier for Remus to ignore him. He addressed James instead. "What do you mean, what do we want?" James raised an eyebrow. "We were worried about you. Your matron called the Muggle police and said you'd escaped. Somehow Dumbledore found out and got in touch with my parents. I think they thought you'd come to ours. Sirius was sure you'd gone into London. He followed your scent practically all the way from the children's home." "You were at St. Edmund's, yes?" "Yeah." Remus cringed at that, embarrassed. He had never wanted his friends to know what it was like where he lived. He sighed and held out his arms, as if presenting himself for inspection. "Well, you found me," he said. "As you can see, I'm perfectly fine. Now go away and tell your dog to stop barking." He couldn't help slipping in a nasty barb at Sirius. His desire to hurt him had not gone away, apparently. Padfoot whined slightly and ducked his head. James ignored it, focusing on Remus. "You're not perfectly fine. Never mind the fact that you appear to be hanging out in a Muggle squat, or the fact that the Muggle police are looking for you. We have to bring you back, right now. Dumbledore can only avoid telling the Ministry you've gone walkabout for 24 hours, he said. Then they'll set the auras on you." "What? Why?" But it suddenly dawned on Remus exactly why. He was not just a runaway teen like Grant and his friends. He was a dangerous creature on the loose. He suddenly felt very, very tired. "Fuck's sake," he muttered, looking down. "Come home with us, Remus." James extended a hand. "Dad said you can stay for the rest of the summer." "I haven't forgiven him," Remus said fiercely, looking at James because he could not look at Sirius. James looked as tired as Remus felt. "I know, mate. It's okay. He gets it." That made him angrier still. He didn't want Sirius to get it. He wanted, well, he didn't know what he wanted, begging on his hands and knees. Padfoot was doing a good job of that as it was. He sighed. "Look, I've got a friend here. Let me go and tell him I'm leaving." Upstairs, he called for Grant from the hall. He didn't like to say a big goodbye in front of everyone. "You all right, Remus, mate?" Grant said from the top of the stairs, peering down at James and the dog Sirius waiting in the hall. "Yeah, fine. Look, I'm going to go. I have to go." "He a friend?" Grant eyed James suspiciously. "You going to be safe?" "Yeah, he's a friend from school. It's fine. I can ring you, maybe?" He had no idea how he would contact a Muggle squat from a wizarding household. "You can come back any time." "Thanks. Seriously, Grant, thanks for everything. You're amazing." "Don't make me blush." Grant wrapped his arms around his skinny body, looking down at his feet. "'S nothing you wouldn't do for me." "Right." Remus nodded. Grant looked down the stairs again. "That dog belonged to him or something. Should be on a lead." "Yeah, probably." Remus nodded, hoping Sirius could hear. "Not dangerous, is it? Bloody hate dogs, me." "He's pretty tame, don't worry. I'll be in touch, okay?" Remus bit his lip, glancing back through the open door into the crowded squat. "Will you be okay here?" Grant shrugged and grinned. "Don't worry about me, sweetheart. I always land on me feet." Remus stepped forward, putting a hand on Grant's shoulder to push him gently backwards into the shadow of the stairwell, so that they could not be seen by James and Sirius or through the doorway. He hugged him tightly. Grant hugged him back so beautifully. They pulled away and shared a brief, friendly kiss before both grinning shyly and stepping apart. "What is it about you, eh?" Grant ruffled Remus's hair. "Don't stay away too long." "See you," Remus nodded. Chapter 94, Summer 1976, Part 2, The Potters. They caught the night bus back to the Potters. It was Remus's first experience of this bizarre wizard transport, but he was so fuzzy from lack of sleep and the remnants of the weed that he found himself dozing off in the comfortable purple armchair. Sirius stayed a dog for the duration, but Remus refused to give him any extra points for this. James shook him awake once they arrived. It was late afternoon now. Remus stopped outside the front gate and looked at James nervously. "Will Dumbledore be there?" "I think he's gone," James said reassuringly. Moody might have stopped by, though. For me, he's seeing Dad. Look, I didn't want to say anything on the bus, but it's been a bad summer, you know, for the war. We're losing... Losing? Yeah, let's talk about it inside. Padfoot." James clicked his fingers at the black dog. Instantly, Sirius transformed back into himself. Remus looked away at once. "Still gorgeous, then. You bastard, you bastard." Inside, Mrs. Potter came running. "Remus!" She reached her arms up to pull him into a hug. "Euphemia!" A voice barked from the living room. "Oh, for goodness sake," Mrs. Potter muttered. She took a step back and looked Remus in the eye. "What did Monty and I give you for Christmas in 1973? "A chess set," Remus said quickly, eyeing the doorway Moody's voice had come through. "It's him," Effie called, outstretching her arms once more and hugging him as tightly as their height difference would allow. "We were all so worried about you, dear." "I'm okay," Remus said, embarrassed. "We thought you'd been, well, it doesn't bear thinking about. People going missing, dark marks, I really don't..." She looked very pale and washed out, as if she'd had a lot of bad news lately. Remus felt terrible for adding to her troubles. "Never mind," she said briskly, smiling again. "Something to eat, or would you like a wash first? Albus sent your things, they're up in your usual room." My things? From the home, dear. Dumbledore sent them first thing this morning." Everything had happened so quickly. Was that really necessary? Moody appeared from the living room. He looked Remus up and down with one eye. The other, he appeared to have injured recently. It was covered by a thick leather patch. The effect made him look even more grizzled and terrifying than ever. "Lupin," he nodded. "A word." "No, Alistair." Mrs. Potter seemed to have surprised everyone when she turned and placed herself between Remus and Moody. "He's only just arrived, and look at him. He's clearly exhausted. This can wait until tomorrow. Effie, this is a matter of ministry." "Oh, I don't give a toss," she tutted, shutting him up with a wag of her finger. "He's only 16, he's not of age, and he's in my care. Remus." She turned around, her voice kind again. "You just pop upstairs, eh? I'll have Gully send some food up, but don't you come down until you're quite ready." Remus blinked in amazement. Could it be that an adult actually wanted to leave him alone? That had to be a first. He had a new respect for Euphemia Potter. "Thanks," he murmured, avoiding Moody's fierce gaze and edging past them, ignoring James and Sirius, heading straight for the stairs, climbing them as fast as his clunky hip would allow. All of his things had been neatly tidied away into drawers and cupboards in his bedroom, as if he lived there. He wondered what it would be like having a place like this to call home, a place with a private bedroom and a house elf and a mother. He took his wand out of his trunk and held it for a little while just to feel it. What a day! Remus felt terrible about leaving Grant after he had been so hospitable with the little he'd had. There were 3 empty bedrooms in the Potter's house. Grant would be sharing a mattress on the floor tonight. He sat on the bed and wished it wasn't so comfortable. He could easily sleep again, but he was hungry too and didn't want to miss Gully. As if by magic, there was a soft knock at the door. "Come in." James poked his head around. "Hiya. I offered to bring the tray up. Hope you don't mind." Remus made a helpless gesture. James looked awkward. "Can I come in?" "Okay. Can Padfoot?" "No." "Okay." James disappeared, and Remus heard him whisper, "Give him a bit of time, eh?" before reappearing and entering the room with a tray piled high with what looked like ham sandwiches. "Mum suggested soup," he explained, setting in down on the bed, "but I said you'd want something meaty." "Cheers," Remus nodded, grabbing one of the rolls and stuffing it into his mouth. At least then he didn't have to talk. "How are you feeling?" James asked, his eyes full of concern. Remus nodded, mouth full, to indicate that he felt perfectly fine. James nodded back. This is how it will be, Remus thought glumly, without Sirius to translate between us. James and Remus were very good friends, best friends. They had been alone together before, had private conversations and shared confidences, but somehow it wasn't the same. Sirius had always been the common denominator, who understood them both, bridging the gap in a way. "Look," James said, "tell me to piss off if you want, and I'll let you rest, but I need to tell you something. It's important." "Is it about Moody?" Remus asked, swallowing. "Yeah." James said, "Yeah, he'll want to tell you, but Dad and I thought that it should come from a friend first." "He's here on ministry business, it sounds like," Remus said carefully, wanting to understand everything, so James didn't need to explain it. "He's an aura, so has there been an attack?" "Yes." James looked like he was struggling to maintain eye contact, but he was brave, and he did what needed to be done. "Actually, there have been a few this summer, and some people going missing, people on our side. Then there was another attack last night, Remus." He put emphasis on this. "Last night, the full moon." "A werewolf," Remus breathed. James nodded, his mouth a grim straight line. Remus put down the sandwich. His stomach growled in protest, but that was just the wolf, wanting more than it deserved, as usual. It would have to starve. "I was at St. Edmund's S," Remus said desperately. "The whole time, locked up. Madam Pumphrey saw me. I can't have got out. Look." He raised his shirt hurriedly to show James the long, raw gashes across his ribs. James winced and looked away. Remus remembered that James had rarely ever seen his scars. It was Sirius, who had always been so fascinated. "I know," James said once Remus had replaced his shirt. "And Mum and Dad know. Dumbledore explained everything. He told Moody there was no way you had anything to do with anything, but he'll want to talk to you anyway." Did anyone get hurt?" "Yeah, a few deaths, some muggles and a wizard family." "Shit. Are you okay?" "I honestly don't have an answer for you, Prongs." "Right, sorry." "How's your summer been?" Remus asked, desperate to put off any more bad news. "Good?" "Yeah, not bad. Well, the war's been... but loads of flying. Mary was here for a bit too, to see Sirius." James stopped short. "Sorry. How is Mary?" "Oh, fine, Mary. He sent her home this morning after we heard you were missing. It was his idea to go looking for you. He did nearly everything, even shouted at Dumbledore. I couldn't believe it." "Okay," Remus said coldly. James frowned. "Moony, he's so sorry." "I've heard. He was a mess when he heard you were missing and about the attacks. He thought all sorts of crazy things, that you'd been kidnapped or targeted or something. Can't you at least talk to him? He's miserable." "I don't care how he feels," Remus lied. "I don't want to talk to him." "He's an idiot," James said. "I'm the first to admit it. He doesn't bloody think, he just does whatever comes into his head. But, well, you have to remember his family, the way they treated him, the stuff at Christmas." "I know what happened at Christmas," Remus snapped. "I was there too, James." "Yeah, I know, and I felt sorry for him then, I really did. I felt sorry for him when we were kids and every time they hurt him, and when they kicked him out. I've spent a lot of time feeling so sorry for him. But this... He stopped. Tears would ruin everything. No tears. James was very quiet. "I'll let you rest," he said finally, getting up to leave. Thursday, the 12th of August, 1976. Remus didn't leave the room for the rest of the afternoon, except once to use the bathroom. It was no better than St. Edmund's S, he thought self-pityingly. Better food, obviously, and magic and quiet, but, well, he still spent all his time trying to avoid everybody, didn't he? Moody was still in the house. He could smell him. Moody had a strange scent, a combination of very strong, powerful magic, heavy and metallic like iron, plus something else, coal embers or charred wood. He would not leave until he spoke with Remus, so Remus stayed put. Sirius's scent was all too familiar, stronger in the house now he called it home, permeating every room. He hadn't been moping by himself all summer. No matter what James said, Sirius had the Potters and Mary and his best friend all telling him how wonderful and hard done by he was. Poor little rich boy, probably hadn't missed Remus at all. Except, James had said, no. Remus stiffened his resolve. Sirius had to pay, even if it was only in Remus's silence. The next day he went down for breakfast, more out of politeness towards his hosts than anything else. He tried his best to smile at James's mother and thank her as she served him a bowl of porridge, but scowled when Sirius pushed the jar of honey towards him. He ignored it, and for the first time in his life ate his porridge unsweetened. It tasted crap. "We'll go to Diagon Alley today, I think," Mrs. Potter said as the kettle boiled. "Your letters arrived this morning. Remus—" "I'm very sorry, but you'll have to stay here, dear. I'll pick up your bits." "I get my books second-hand," Remus said, flushing, "from the supply at Hogwarts. I've got no money." "Oh, well, I don't mind. I'm already sorting it for James and Sirius." "I'm paying you back," Sirius jumped in eagerly. "As soon as I'm 17, I promise." "I know, dear." Mrs. Potter patted Sirius's arm fondly. "I can't pay you back," Remus said, talking to Mrs. Potter, but glaring at Sirius, gritting his teeth. "Even when I'm 17, I haven't got an inheritance." Sirius lowered his eyes, crestfallen. "Why can't Remus come, Mum?" James jumped in quickly. "He's never been before." "I'm afraid it's not very safe, love," Mrs. Potter sighed. "Dumbledore and Moody both agree after the attack." Remus dropped his head into his hands. He saw his life unravelling before his eyes. It would always be this way. Places he couldn't go, things he couldn't afford, friends he couldn't speak to. When the war's over, you'll still be a queer werewolf with a chip on your shoulder. That nasty voice returned. "Wait," James said suddenly. "Our letters arrived." Remus looked up, confused. Mrs. Potter was smiling mischievously, her eyes twinkling. "My goodness," she said, pulling 3 thick envelopes from her pinafore. "If it took you that long to cotton on, then I'm very concerned about your owl results." She handed each of the boys their letters, and they tore them open. Remus stared at the list of letters on the parchment. Weirdly, the thing that startled him most was his acceptable for potions. That was definitely Lily Evans' doing. History of magic, outstanding care of magical creatures, outstanding charms, outstanding, and the rest exceeds expectations. A flutter of excitement started up in his midriff. These were bloody good results. "Yes, Moony, you beauty," James cheered, reading over his shoulder. "How did you do?" Remus asked bashfully. James handed over his paper. He'd got almost entirely exceeds expectations and 2 outstandings, one in Defense Against the Dark Arts and the other in Transfiguration. "Go and show you, Father," Mrs. Potter said after kissing her son gleefully. Mr. Potter had not yet left his study, as far as Remus could tell. James took him a plate of toast, too. Sirius was looking at Remus across the table, biting his lip. "You did well, then?" he asked, tentatively. Remus nodded curtly. "I'm pretty happy, yeah." He desperately wanted to know how Sirius had done, mostly to find out if he'd done better in History of Magic. Luckily, he didn't need to ask. Sirius slid his parchment across the table. Remus craned his neck to look at it. They had achieved exactly the same number of owls in different subjects. Sirius's outstanding grades had come in Transfiguration, Defense Against the Dark Arts, and incredibly Muggle studies. Remus tried not to smile at this. Instead, he glanced up at Sirius coolly and said, "I beat you in history." Mrs. Potter and the boys left shortly after breakfast, and Remus was alone. He went outside into the garden and sat on the edge of the low patio wall, staring out at their acres of green open land. He pulled out his fags, only 3 left. He could maybe go into town later and buy some. He had a bit of shrapnel in his back pocket. Too tall to steal these days. Lupin. Remus hoped his shoulders hadn't stiffened too visibly at the sound of that gruff voice. He turned slowly. "All right, Moody?" He was glad to have the cigarette. Something to hide behind. "May I join you?" Remus shrugged. Moody sat down on the wall beside him. "Lovely day." "Yeah, terrific. No doubt the Potter boys spilled the beans on the werewolf attack." Remus nodded, appreciating Alistair's bluntness. "Let's get this over with." "Yep," he exhaled slowly, making a smoke ring. "What do you want to ask me? You know I was locked up." "I've spoken with Albus and Poppy. They both confirmed your whereabouts." "Yippee," Remus said sarcastically. Moody gave him a stern look with his still-functioning eye. We have suspects, though. One in particular, someone you might have heard of." Remus went cold. His hands began to shake. He pretended he was just flicking ash. "Greyback?" he asked, his voice colourless. "Greyback," Moody confirmed. Remus stubbed out the cigarette and gripped the wall with both hands, as if he might fall. "I didn't know he was... I hadn't heard of him attacking anyone in a long time. I thought he was abroad somewhere." "Been doing your research, have you?" Moody said, a note of challenge in his voice. "Can't say I blame you, lad. I'd want to know everything I could. He's not tried to contact you, then?" "No." Remus was shocked. "Why on earth? If you've done your research properly and Dumbledore says you're clever, then you'll know Greyback has a particular penchant for children?" Remus had to stop himself from touching the ancient scar on his side, those 11-year-old teeth marks. "Never wondered why." "He's a monster," Remus said firmly. He fumbled with his cigarette packet. He needed another one to keep steady, what he wouldn't give for a spliff. "He is," Moody agreed, "but he's got a motive, mad as it seems. We've reason to believe that he likes to turn kids young, so he can show up when they're old enough and strong enough to join him." "Join him? In his mind, he's your father," Moody said as if it was nothing. "He'll want you to take up the family trade, as it were." "That's disgusting!" Remus stood up, practically shouting. "It is," Moody replied, unperturbed. "But you need to be aware. Greyback hasn't been seen in Britain since the last person he turned." Here he gave Remus a very pointed look. "But a wizarding family was killed last night, all except their youngest child, who was bitten but survived. A dark mark had been cast above the house. He was definitely working with Voldemort then. Just brilliant. Is this why I can't go to Diagon Alley? It's best if you stay away from wizard-populated areas for a while, till we catch him." "Hogwarts." "Hogwarts is safe," Moody said, "but not Hogsmeade. I'm asking Dumbledore to keep you away." "Oh, okay. And no more running away." That was about something else." Remus sighed. Then he thought of something. "What happened to the kid? The one that was bitten?" He raised his cigarette to his lips and sucked, but realized he hadn't lit it. Moody snapped his fingers and it ignited immediately. "At St. Mungo's," the aura said. "Being treated. They'll be fine." "Oh, will they?" Remus could have laughed. He looked out across the fields again. It was such a beautiful day. Until the next moon, I suppose. "The right people got there in time. We'll do what we can." The right people. Remus wondered whether the right people had been responsible for his being carted off to St. Edmund's S. "We have a mutual friend," Moody said out of the blue. "Hmm?" Remus frowned at him. "Leo Ferox, good man." "Oh, right. How do you know him?" "We were at school together, cross paths at work sometimes, and, of course, working with Dumbledore. I hear you and your pals are planning to join up yourselves, that right?" Remus had the impression that Moody knew the answer to this and just wanted Remus to confirm it himself. "Yes," he nodded. "I know I'm not James, but I'm not bad at dueling, and if I can help, I want to. If you're anything like your father, you'll be more than a help." Remus nodded glumly. How was he supposed to know whether he was anything like his father? What a stupid thing to say. "Dunno about that," he said bitterly. "I have a few limitations my father didn't have." "Could look at it that way." Moody tilted his head. "Could look at it another way. How many werewolves do you think we've got on our side?" Remus frowned as if Moody had sworn at him. Is that why Dumbledore kept him so close? Is that why he hadn't alerted the Ministry as soon as Remus was reported missing? He didn't know if that was better or worse. At least someone thought he was useful. Chapter 95, Summer 1976, Part 3, Peace Talks. It wasn't easy for Remus to keep Sirius at a distance while he was staying with the Potters. The house was big enough, but that didn't matter much in a family home, something Remus was only just learning. Mrs. Potter gave Remus his space during the first couple of days, but after that it was clear that she had no idea of the rift between the Marauders and expected the three boys to spend all of their time together as usual. As much as they were each uncomfortable with this arrangement, for their own reasons, none of them wanted to disappoint or worry Euphemia. So an uneasy truce was struck, and Remus spent most of his time reading his book, sitting close enough to James and Sirius that it did not look suspicious. Grant had said that it wouldn't always hurt, and though he hadn't had the full facts of the situation, Remus was starting to believe him. He still felt very angry towards Sirius, but it hurt less as the final weeks of summer drained away in a flood of sunshine and blue skies. He was able at least to be civil, and Sirius seemed grateful. At any rate, he had stopped trying to corner Remus into a conversation every 5 minutes. Besides, after his conversation with Moody, Remus had other things occupying his mind. For years now he had been labouring under the assumption that Greyback did not know him, that he would have the element of surprise in his corner. But now it seemed that Greyback might be looking for him too. He would not tell the Marauders this, not until he knew more. No use getting them worried. If Moody said that Hogwarts was safe, then Remus was inclined to believe him for now. The Potters clearly trusted him, and that would have to be enough. What was more, he knew Ferox. Remus had had Ferox on his mind too. Once again, his old professor seemed like the safest option when it came to asking questions. He understood Remus's need to know more, even if he didn't know why exactly. And Remus didn't want to bother Mr. Potter, not when he seemed to have the weight of the world on his shoulders already. He would send an owl to Ferox as soon as he was back at school, and as soon as the dust had settled on this recent revelation. In the meantime, Peter came over every day, and they went out on their brooms, or else lounged about on the lawn, smoking, listening to Sirius's record player, and sunbathing. Remus turned a warm hazelnut brown all over, which made him look healthier than he ever had, and his hair bleached a shade fairer. On the penultimate day of the holidays, they were doing just this. It was too hot to move, and all 4 of them were lying on their backs, baking in the sun. Remus had positioned himself a little further away from the others, just to show Sirius that he was not off the hook. Also because Sirius had an annoying habit of taking his shirt off, and Remus was trying not to notice. "So, tell me again," Peter yawned up at the sun, arms behind his head. "What was the night bus like? I've always wanted to go on it." "Dream big, Petey," Sirius drawled. "It wasn't that great," James replied. "Can't wait until we can all apparate. Lessons start in January." "I'm going to be rubbish at it," Peter said forlorn. "Desi has been reading the theory books. I can't get my head around it." "Well, it's better than relying on that stupid bus." James removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "It's fine for magical locations, but the driver kept getting lost on the way to St. Edmund's S." Remus's stomach flipped. He really hated the idea that James and Sirius had been there. He felt as though they'd seen some private part of him he would have preferred to keep hidden, like the first time he'd transformed in front of them. "I can't believe I missed that too." Peter sighed. "Were there loads of muggles? What was it like?" "Come on, Pete," James said. "That's Mooney's home you're talking about." "It's fine," Remus said. "I bet it's great living with loads of other people your age," James said encouragingly. It was James's greatest sorrow that he had grown up an only child. Remus looked for the right word. "It's noisy. Did you go inside?" "Padfoot did, crawled under a hole in the back fence." "Didn't go in the building, though," Sirius said, rolling onto his front. The muscles in his back moved smoothly under his skin, and Remus had to fight not to bite his lip. "Some bitch started throwing stones at me." "Matron," Remus confirmed. "Must have been." Sirius nodded, obviously pleased at the attention. "If she treats people the way she treats dogs, then I don't blame you for running away." "It wasn't really about her," Remus said pointedly. "It's lucky Prongs and Padfoot found you, though, eh, Mooney?" Peter smiled, blissfully ignorant. "Otherwise you'd be lost in Muggle London." "I wasn't lost," Remus said icily, putting his book down finally. "I was with a friend." But James said, "I said he was in a squat, Pete, not alone. He was with this Muggle chap. Sorry, Remus, I've forgotten his name." "He didn't tell us his name," Sirius said, out of nowhere. Remus sat up and squinted at him. Sirius was staring at him in a strange way, but it only brought Remus's hackles up. "No," he replied, "I didn't." He got to his feet. "I'm going in, it's too hot." James, who seemed to have grasped that the conversation had taken an unpleasant turn, got up too. "Yeah, you're right, Mooney. Shall we all go in for a bit? Have a drink and do that washing up Mum wanted sorting. She'll be back soon." Mrs. Potter had left for the afternoon on an errand, and Mr. Potter was at work. Gully was in the house somewhere, of course, but he never made his presence known unless summoned. The boys were pretty much alone. "I'll go home if you're going to do chores," Peter grumbled, struggling to his own feet. "I can do housework at mine." "Cheer up, Wormy," James slapped him on his sweaty shoulder. "There are jam tarts in the kitchen. You can have the marmalade one if you want." The four of them strolled back across the crisp, brittle lawn to the house, stopping at the shed so that Sirius and James could put their brooms away first. Pete went straight in for his tart, and Remus hung back on the patio between them all, feeling very put out and agitated. He sat on the low brick wall again and listened to Sirius and James's cheerful banter from inside the shed. "I ought to polish the handle again before I pack it away." "Bloody hell, Prongs, you polish it twice a day already. It's called looking after your equipment, Black. I call it sexual frustration." "Piss off." There was a scuffle, and Remus could hear Sirius's gleeful cackling as the two boys wrestled. "Wait till we're back at school and I can curse your bollocks off." James laughed. "Don't you dare. Some of us use our bollocks. You tosser, I ought to— Oh, shit, watch out." "Ah," Sirius cried. "Bugger, that hurt." They both staggered back out into the daylight, Sirius clutching his hand. "What did you do?" James asked, peering over. He paled upon seeing Sirius's hand and backed away. "Sorry, mate, you know how I am with blood." "Oh, it's really bleeding too." "Oi, get away from me." "What shall I do, wait till your mum gets home?" "No choice. I don't know any healing spells." "Ow, it bloody hurts." "Oh, for God's sake." Remus stood up, squinting. "Let me see." Sirius and James both turned to look at him. Sirius's eyes flickered to James, then back to Remus, before he walked over, hand outstretched. The cut was very deep, blood running in rivulets down Sirius's long white wrists. Remus swallowed. "You need to clean that, it'll get infected. Hang on, I've got some stuff in my trunk." He led Sirius through the kitchen, upstairs to the first-floor bathroom, and turned on the cold tap. He had some TCP in his trunk left over from St. Edmund's S, where he often had to look after his own scrapes when Madame Pumphrey wasn't around. He brought it through, along with some cotton balls and gauze. "Come here," he said, sitting on the edge of the bathtub and motioning that Sirius sit on the closed toilet seat. He obeyed, still holding his hand out warily. It was much cooler in the bathroom, reassuringly sterile, like the hospital wing. Remus found that very calming. Sirius was placid and docile, trusting Remus completely with watchful eyes, like a pet. "What's that?" he asked as Remus tipped some disinfectant onto the cotton. "TCP," he said. "It'll clean the wound." "Is it muggle stuff?" "I'm sure it will work just the same." Remus raised an eyebrow. He took Sirius's wrist, gripping it more roughly than he really needed to. His skin was hot from the sun. Remus could feel his pulse. "It's going to sting," he said as he pressed down. Sirius flinched, and Remus was reminded of the time after Christmas they'd spent in the Potter's bathroom, piercing Sirius's ear. "Will it hurt?" Sirius panicked at the last minute, as Remus was poised with the pin. "Well, we've numbed it a bit, but yeah, probably," Remus said, matter-of-factly. "Don't be such a girl." "Be gentle with me, Mooney." They had both laughed, and Remus shook him fondly. "Stay still, you big wuss." He finished cleaning the wound and then wrapped it in gauze, taping it neatly. "Probably throb a bit," he explained. "Meant to be tight. Stops the bleeding." "Thanks, Mooney." "Any time." Remus went to get up, placing both hands on the cold porcelain of the tub. Sirius suddenly reached out and touched his arm. "I'm sorry." "I know," Remus replied. "You've said—" "What I did—" Sirius licked his lips nervously, still grasping Remus's arm as if that was the only thing keeping him in place. "Don't!" Remus frowned, his resolve weakening. "But we ought to talk." "We can't," Remus said simply. "I can't anyway. There are no words for what you did to me." "No," Sirius hung his head. "You're right." He let go, but Remus didn't walk away. though he knew he ought to. Sirius ran his uninjured hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm such an idiot," he said. Remus did not refute this. Sirius continued. "It was a really good year, wasn't it, 5th year, spending the moons together and the parties? Then I went and ballsed it all up." "Well," Remus relented, "I made some mistakes too. I made things were different after my birthday." "What? Moony, no." Sirius's eyes widened. He looked so earnest and sincere that Remus wanted to forgive everything in an instant. "I know I wasn't. You didn't do anything wrong. That what happened on your birthday, it was—" Remus held his breath while Sirius searched for the word. "It was really brave," Sirius finished. Remus blinked. Brave? What on earth was that supposed to mean? Sirius saw his reaction and tried to cover his tracks. "I just mean that you shouldn't worry about it. That didn't change anything, okay?" "Okay." Remus looked down, then, feeling braver, looked up again. "We never talked about that." "You're my best friend, Remus." "Sirius, please. And I know what I did. There aren't words, no, so I'll shut up and I'll do actions instead, okay? I'll prove I'm sorry every day. I swear I'll never do another stupid thing without thinking again." Remus gave him a small smile. "Come on." Sirius smiled too, looking relieved. "Yeah, okay, maybe a bit ambitious. I'll never do anything to hurt any one of my friends ever again. How's that?" Remus breathed in deeply. Forgiveness would be such a blessed relief. It's a start. Chapter 96. 6th year, September. Wednesday, the 1st of September, 1976. This is the year, lads, this is the year it finally happens. 6 years of waiting and it all pays off. "You can't be talking about what I think you're talking about." Remus raised an eyebrow over the top of his book. "Oh, yes." James was beaming like a drunkard. "Lily Evans is definitely going to realize she's mad about me. I can feel it." "Are you sure, though?" Sirius smirked. "You've had these feelings before." "I have." James nodded respectfully. "You're quite right, Padfoot. But something is different this time. I can practically taste it. Love is very much in the air." "Or lust," Remus muttered, flipping his page over. "You're probably just picking up on the raging hormones coming off these idiots." He nodded at Sirius and Peter, who both kept glancing out of the train window, looking for their respective girlfriends. "Who are you calling an idiot, Moony?" Sirius retorted. "I can't help it if I drive women wild with desire." "Sirius bloody Black, I could kill you!" Mary's furious shriek could have shattered glass. Sirius practically leapt 2 feet off his seat. Remus gave a satisfied nod. "Wild with something anyway." James guffawed, nearly choking on the Bertie Bott's every flavour bean he had been chewing. No one was happier about Remus and Sirius's reconciliation than James. He didn't say anything directly, but as soon as he recognized that his 2 best friends were no longer keeping each other at arm's length, he was grinning from ear to ear, back to his usual mischievous self, and therefore back to sighing over Lily Evans. Lily entered the carriage at this point, just behind Mary, who had burst in like a whirlwind. Lily smiled at Remus and took the spare seat beside him. He smiled back and they settled in to watch the show. "What have I done?" Sirius asked, affronted. "You really don't know, do you?" Mary stood with her hands on her hips, a look of disgust on her face. She looked spectacular when she was angry. Her gold hoop earrings jangled, her coal-rimmed eyes were wide and fiery. "Diagon Alley!" She stamped her foot. Sirius's eyes widened. "Bugger! Fuck you, Black!" Mary turned and stormed back out. Sirius scrambled up to follow her down the corridor just as the train started moving. "Oi, Mary, wait, I'm sorry." Remus turned to Lily. "What did he do?" "Forgot her birthday." Lily grinned. "Apparently they had a plan to meet in Diagon Alley and she waited for 2 hours. "Oh, bollocks!" James slapped his forehead. "I was supposed to remind him." "You're as bad as each other," Lily snorted. "Godric saved the girls stupid enough to marry any of you." "Has anyone seen Desdemona?" Peter asked distractedly. Lily shook her head and the boys shrugged. Peter got up. "I'll see you lot later," and wandered out of the carriage. "Bloody hell," James said. "What's happened to the Marauders?" "Oi, I'm here," Remus said, returning to his book. "My only true friend." James smiled. "You'll never leave me for a girl, will you, Moony?" "No chance," Remus replied, turning the page again. Wait, Lily yelped, grabbing Remus's shoulder. That's why they call you Moony? Remus gave her a sideways grin and nodded very slightly. Lily looked amazed. I can't believe I didn't work it out sooner. Hang on, James frowned. Worked what out? It's just an in-joke, right, Remus? Some stupid thing we came up with as kids, no big secret or any... Prongs. Remus shook his head, laughing. It's fine. She knows. James' hazel eyes widened, and he stared at them both. Lily giggled, her eyes teasing, and Remus suddenly saw exactly why she drove James so crazy. You're an idiot, Potter, but at least you can keep a secret. Well, of course, James straightened his back and puffed out his chest. We'd all do anything for Moony. Remus was really quite touched by that and had to raise his book to hide his face. He hoped Lily knew that James was being quite honest and not just showing off for her approval. The compartment door slid open and Marlene entered. She'd had her hair cut into a neat bob over the summer, like Mia Farrow. It was very becoming. She smiled and nodded at her friends, sitting down next to James. Sirius and Mary are having a proper screaming match out there. It's mental. She looked at Lily, then James, then Remus. What have I missed? Mary forgave Sirius by the time they reached Hogwarts, on the promise that he would take her for a day in Hogsmeade to make up for it. Remus was pleased. He could honestly, truly say that, without bitterness. He felt that Sirius had drawn a line under their kiss, back in the Potter's bathroom, and it was up to him, Remus, to honour and respect that line. Sirius liked Mary. Remus would just have to get over it, that's all. And yes, fine, sometimes Remus fantasized about kissing the hollow of Sirius's collarbone, about tracing a line from the pit of his throat down to his navel. So what? That was purely Remus's problem. He'd have to focus his attentions elsewhere. Perhaps Christopher had become dazzlingly attractive over. The summer, the feast and the sorting was as magnificent and reassuringly predictable as ever. The friends chatted about their new timetables. Lily was extremely disappointed to find out that Remus had chosen to drop potions, but he promised to keep giving her a run for her money in charms. Their summers, tactfully avoiding Mary's birthday and the looming pressure of Newt's. All blissfully normal, Remus thought to himself as they finished their puddings and got up, yawning, ready for bed. I'm knackered, James said, stretching. Early night tonight, eh, Marlene? Practice first thing. Oh, no, you don't, Potter. You're coming with me, Lily said sternly. He blinked as if he couldn't believe his luck. She frowned. We've got to lead the first years to bed. Have you already forgotten you're a prefect? Oh, shit, yeah. Whoops. Lily tutted, getting up. We'll work on your language too. Come on. She looked at the others. Passwords lion heart. They thanked her and went on ahead, leaving James behind, looking confused but grateful. Sirius flung himself into the largest, comfiest couch in the common room, taking up enough space for 3 people. Mary joined him with an indulgent smile, settling her little feet across his legs. Peter and Marlene started a game of chess on the carpet in front of the fire, and Remus picked up his book. Everything as it should be. He smiled peacefully. A chapter in, Sirius evidently grew bored. When's our first party, then? He asked the general room. Our first match is in November, Marlene said from the floor, her eyes on the game. You couldn't look away for a moment when you were playing Peter. No one knew how he did it. You can organize the victory party if you want, Black. That's ages away, Mary purred. Halloween, close to your birthday. We can do it after the feast. Remus's stomach rumbled at the mention of a feast. He put down his book. Wonder if there's time to go down to the kitchens. You can't possibly be hungry. Sirius arched an eyebrow. You had 3 helpings of pudding. You're probably right. Remus sighed and settled back into the armchair. He shifted sideways, dangling his long legs over the end, kicking off his dirty tennis shoes, and returned to his book. It was Dickens' The Pickwick Papers and funny but dry, so that you had to really focus in order to actually find the funny bits. Unfortunately, a full stomach, a long day and a warm fireplace were not conducive to concentration, and Remus soon dozed off. It must have been only half an hour that had passed when Remus snapped awake at the sound of raucous laughter. Stay still, Potter. I'm trying. Remus blinked a few times, confused and groggy. He stared around to find Peter and Marlene rolling on the hearth rug, giggling, Mary standing next to Lily near the portrait hole, where James appeared to be performing a very complicated and vigorous Irish jig. Remus smiled sleepily and straightened up, his back sore from sleeping all folded up like a deck chair. He turned left, just to get the gristle in his neck to pop, and caught Sirius watching him with a soft, unconscious smile. Remus raised an eyebrow, which seemed to break the spell, and Sirius blinked, then looked away quickly. "What happened?" Mary was asking, with hands on her hips. Silly Pratt was showing off as per usual. His hex hit a suit of armour and backfired. Lily was half laughing, half trying to corner James for long enough to perform the counter-jinx. "Who were you trying to hex?" Sirius stood up now, crossing the room. "Bloody Mulciber," James said, a comical frown on his face as his legs flew about energetically beneath him. "Petrificus totalus," Sirius said with a yawn. James froze still and fell to the ground as stiff as a board. "Black," Lily sighed. "What?" Sirius grinned. "I was only trying to help." Remus giggled, still stretching. It was probably time for bed. He got up slowly as Sirius, Mary and Lily stood over James, arguing over which spell to break first, the dancing one or the petrifying one, and Sirius was in favour of simply levitating him up to bed as he was. Just as Remus was heading in the direction of the boys' dormitory, he caught sight of Christopher. The fifth-year boy was coming down the stairs with a shiny silver prefect's badge pinned proudly to his chest. Unfortunately, Christopher had not become incredibly good-looking over the summer, in fact quite the opposite. He had obviously been somewhere very hot and sunny over the summer, and his pale English skin was scorched bright red and peeling grotesquely at his nose. They stared at each other for a moment before Christopher looked at his feet, then walked away without a word. Remus felt the sting of guilt. He'd have to apologize at some point. Wednesday, 8th September 1976. With your owls now behind you and your newts over a year away, do not fall into the trap of believing that this will be an easy year. Your 6th year lays the foundation for your advanced exams, and the work you do will be pivotal in determining the opportunities available to you once you leave school. Remus fought not to yawn. He might have felt nervous, worried, spurred into action, and he had been, the first time he'd heard this speech. They were halfway through their first week of 6th year, and so far every teacher had performed some variation on this address. This morning the lecture was being given by Professor Flitwick, and therefore made mildly more interesting because of his squeaky little voice. Remus looked out of the window. It was the full moon tonight, and he was restless. He had a horrible feeling about it, as well as the usual early twinges and surges of adrenaline. It was the first full moon he would be spending with the Marauders since that terrible night in June. It was the first full moon after the werewolf attack in August, since he had run away from St. Edmund's S. The murders played heavy on his mind. The family was called Monday. Both parents had been Muggle-born. It had been in the papers, and Remus had read everything he could while he was at the Potters. He'd searched high and low for mention of Greyback, for a picture, a description, anything. If this man was after him, then he needed to be armed with information. But there was nothing. The press wasn't publishing anything more than Moody had already told him. The letter to Ferox had been written for almost a week now. It was burning a hole in Remus's back pocket. He'd been waiting to get a chance to sneak off to the owlery on his own. Dear Professor Ferox. He knew that Ferox wasn't a professor anymore, but he didn't know what else to call him and couldn't bring himself to address him as anything so familiar as Leo. I hope it's okay for me to write to you. I had a few questions, and I couldn't think of anyone else who might know. I spoke to Alistair Moody while I was staying with the Potters this summer, and he said you're well. I hope you aren't anywhere too dangerous. Moody told me that the Monday family were murdered by Greyback. He said that Greyback might try to find me and get me to join him. I hope you know I would never join that side. I do want to be prepared if he comes after me, though. Can you tell me anything useful? I don't even know what he looks like. I'm sorry to bother you with this, but you are the only person I can ask, because you knew my dad and you know me. Thank you, Remus J. Lupin. He knew that you were supposed to end letters yours sincerely or yours faithfully, or something like that, but it seemed so silly and formal. He worried that Ferox might think he was trying too hard to seem grown up. "Moony, wakey, wakey!" Sirius shook his shoulder. "What?" Remus looked up, blinking and dazed. Sirius was standing over him, and everyone else was packing up their things. "Lesson's over, Dopey. Where did you wander off to?" "Just distracted," Remus replied. He stood up and scooped his own assortment of quills and parchment into his book bag, getting up. Sirius's face softened. He leaned in and said very low, "Is it because of tonight? Are you nervous?" Remus gave a sort of half-shrug, half-reassuring smile. "No more than usual." "We've got a free now," Sirius said chirpily. He was very much enjoying his new timetable, having dropped 4 subjects. "Want to pop round the greenhouses?" "Nah," Remus grinned. "It's okay, I have to go to the owlery. Got a letter to post." "Oh yeah, I'll come with you. James has another Ponzi prefect meeting. I swear you never went to this many meetings." "Nah, I sort of left it all up to Evans, to be honest," Remus smirked. "Of course I wasn't trying to impress her." Sirius laughed. "Too bloody right. At least you know where your priorities are, Moony. Who's the letter for?" Do you mind not asking?" Remus looked down as they left the classroom, walking with a slightly longer stride than usual so that Sirius would have to walk faster to keep up. It was a cheap trick, but there had to be some benefits to being tall. "Oh, of course, mate." Sirius nodded respectfully. "Don't mind me, I'm just bored, you know." He had been extremely pliant lately, eager to supply Remus with any allowances he requested. Remus thought he could probably get away with snogging Mary on the Gryffindor dinner table with Sirius's blessing, the way things were. They tramped up to the owlery quickly. With the moon waxing, Remus's energy levels were through the roof, then going single file up the final, narrow, winding staircase. The owlery was a beautiful place, by anyone's standards, provided you ignored the smell of bird shit, with the very best view of anywhere else in the castle. It was a bright and airy space with high rafters, filled with the soft sounds of roosting owls. Sirius dutifully hung back a respectable distance as Remus selected the sturdiest-looking owl. He had no idea where Ferox was or how far away, and wanted a bird that was up to the job, attached his letter and released it through the huge picture window. Sirius was leaning out of the window on the opposite side, staring down at the forbidden forest. "How far do you reckon we got last year?" he asked. "Couple of miles, at least?" "At least," Remus agreed, joining him at the windowsill. "Think we could reach those mountains? They're caves, I bet. I used to quite fancy living in a cave when I was little. Me and Reggie were going to run away from home and become cave dwellers." "Weirdo," Remus shook his head. "It'd be freezing." "Yeah, well, you don't think about that stuff when you're 7, do you?" "I suppose. I never actually thought about running away, to be honest. Lots of boys actually did it. But the police normally brought them back. Matron used to say that if one of us went missing, it was no skin off her nose. She still got paid at the end of the week." "Moony, that's—" Remus laughed and moved away. "Come on, let's get out of here. I'm hungry." They began a slightly slower descent down the spiral staircase, but had to stop halfway as they heard footsteps coming up. Remus's stomach sank when he saw it was Christopher. He'd recovered a bit from his sunburn, but still had a bit of a hot glow around his cheeks and nose. He froze when he saw Sirius with Remus just behind him. The 2 boys flattened themselves against the wall as best they could to let him past. "Hi, Chris," Remus smiled politely. "Hi." Christopher responded, not making eye contact. He was definitely still annoyed about the way Remus had spoken to him at the end of last term. Remus had been worried about that, but he supposed he deserved a bit of cold shoulder. The silver pin gleamed on Chris's robes, and Remus tried not to wince. He could feel it in his teeth, a giddy, sick sensation. "Well done on getting prefect," he said, trying to sound friendly and encouraging. "Yeah, thanks," Christopher nodded. He still didn't look up exactly, but he sort of looked at the space over Remus's left shoulder and gave a weak smile as he passed. The close proximity to the silver was extremely unpleasant, and Remus's head swam, making him dizzy. As Christopher pushed past them both, Remus wobbled forward and had to grip Sirius's shoulder to keep balanced. He had to concentrate on his breathing to avoid fainting altogether until Christopher had reached the owlery and barely noticed that Sirius had slipped a strong arm around his back for support. When he opened his eyes and the wooziness had passed, Remus thought it must only have been a few seconds that they had stood like that, clinging to each other in the shadowy stairway. Must stop getting stuck in confined spaces with him, the logical part of Remus's brain scolded. He realized he had been gripping Sirius's shoulder really quite hard and let go quickly, stepping away and adjusting his robes. "Sorry," he said, "took me by surprise." "It's okay," Sirius smiled, turning and walking down the stairs again. "Another reason to hate prefects, eh?" Chapter 97, 6th year, October. Saturday the 9th of October, 1976. Remus staggered to his feet as the transformation completed and his body settled back into its human form. "That didn't seem too bad," James said, having just transformed himself. "Depends what you mean by bad," Remus grimaced, pulling his trousers on quickly. James looked away, politely to preserve his modesty, and Sirius, still a dog, padded over with Remus's shirt in his mouth, offering it up with a cocked head. "Cheers, Padfoot," Remus smiled. He wanted to pat the dog on the head and had to keep reminding himself that this was Sirius. "Thank Merlin it's Saturday," James yawned, taking a seat on the beaten-up couch. It sagged drearily beneath him, Springs wheezing. "Yeah, if Madame Pumphrey lets me off the hospital wing, I'll probably go straight to bed anyway," Remus replied, stifling his own yawn and laying down on his cot. "You're lucky," Peter said, appearing as if from nowhere in a far corner of the room. "Supposed to be taking Desi to Hogsmeade at 11. Prongs, don't you have to lead the third years down?" "Nah," James yawned again noisily. "Now Evans knows about Remus's furry little problem, she's actually cutting me some slack. That fifth-year kid with the sunburn is doing it instead." "Evans doesn't know anything else, does she?" Sirius finally reappeared, joining James on the couch. James shook his head, leaning back on the couch and closing his eyes. "Oi," Sirius nudged him. "We've got to go soon, don't sleep." "You lot go," Remus murmured. "Get some rest. Thanks for coming and all that." "Coming to Hogsmeade, Mooney?" Sirius asked, hauling James to his feet. "3 broomsticks?" "Can't," Remus shook his head. "Didn't I tell you? Had my permission revoked. After the attacks." "What?" Sirius looked outraged. "They can't punish you for something some other bastard's done." "Shh!" Remus flapped his hand, frowning. Madame Pumphrey could be on her way down the tunnel, and besides he had a headache. "It's not to punish me, it's for my safety. Now get lost, the lot of you." They were gone in just the nick of time. Madame Pumphrey entered the shack only minutes afterwards. She gave him a quick going over and, satisfied, walked Remus back up to the castle. She prescribed him a few hours' sleep in the hospital wing, which he was more than happy to accept. With all of his friends in Hogsmeade, there wasn't much to miss out on. He woke at about lunchtime, stomach rumbling as usual. Madame Pumphrey had evidently anticipated this. There was a plate of cold cuts and bread on his bedside table, along with a bowl of fruit and a large goblet of pumpkin juice, which he drained first. Remus was so ravenous, in fact, that he did not notice the letter propped up in the fruit bowl between 2 apples until he was well into the construction of his second sandwich. When he saw that it was addressed to him in a script familiar from the hundreds of returned Care of Magical Creatures essays, he almost knocked his plate off the bed in his eagerness to open it. "Dear Remus, it's a pleasure to hear from you. I don't mind in the least. I cannot disclose my location at present, but rest assured that I am as safe as it is possible for me to be. I am glad to hear that you are well. Dumbledore told me about your owl results. I'm incredibly proud of you, Remus. I know you must have worked very hard. Keep on like that, and I promise that nothing can stop you. It is perfectly natural that you should want to know more about Greyback. I only wish I had more to tell you. I'm afraid I have never worked on any werewolf-related cases for the Ministry. And if you want my opinion, no one has done any useful research into lycanthropy since your father. And as you know, he was quite terribly wrong about a number of things. I do know that Greyback was a dangerous wizard before he was bitten, and is one of the cruelest men I have ever heard of, save Voldemort himself. The council that freed him against your father's wishes believed him to be a muggle tramp. I would take this to mean that he dresses shabbily and is a skilled manipulator. I'm sorry I can't give you any more than this. I want to emphasize, however, that the most important thing we know about Greyback is that he is dangerous. If you have even the slightest suspicion that he knows where you are, then must contact Dumbledore immediately. Only Dumbledore can be trusted. Best of luck with your newts. Ferox. Remus read this through twice, then read the first paragraph once more, just for the thrill of it. I'm incredibly proud of you, Remus. What a wonderful thing. There was no solid information in there, of course. Nothing Remus hadn't already considered. Of course, Greyback must look homeless. That was the best way to avoid drawing attention to yourself. And Remus was the very last person who needed to hear how dangerous this man was. The letter felt precious all the same, only the Marauders had ever written to him before. Good afternoon, dear. Madame Pumphrey emerged from behind the screen. She had a sixth sense for knowing when he was awake. Hello? He smiled at her, Ferox's encouraging words still in his mind. You're in a good mood, she smiled back, though I don't blame you. Nearly a perfect night. You're free to go as soon as you like. Thanks. He swung his legs out of bed at once, then looked up quickly. Madame Pumphrey, can I ask you something? Of course, Remus, she replied, busying herself about stripping his bed now he had left it. She did it with a sweep of her wand. It was some of the most elegant and seamless magic Remus had ever seen. I'd like to learn about healing spells, just basic stuff. I'm no good at potions. Actually, I dropped it. I was sorry to hear that, she replied, tidying his bedside now. Potion making is a useful skill. Right, but I just want to be able to sort myself out after a full moon, once school finishes, you know. Madame Pumphrey stopped what she was doing and sat on the bed to look at him. When he was a little boy, they were eye to eye when she sat down. Now she had to look up as he towered over her, and he thought for the first time what a very small woman she was. He had never forgotten the morning she had rocked him in her arms, and how safe she made him feel then. He could probably pick her up now if he wanted to, and somehow she still gave him that same sense of security. All right, Remus, she said after surveying him. I teach a small selection of students the basics of healing on Tuesday evenings. You're welcome to join if you wish, though there isn't a qualification in it. I didn't know you did that. She smiled fondly, getting up again and resuming her work. It's to prepare students wishing to begin their training as healers once they leave Hogwarts. I can only presume that healing was not your chosen career path when you spoke with Professor McGonagall last year. Oh yeah, right. He rubbed the back of his head, slightly embarrassed. He had never thought about healing, largely because he thought it probably involved a lot of potions, but also because he was quite certain that no one would want to hire a werewolf to look after vulnerable people. The common room was nearly empty, it being a nice sunny autumnal day and a Hogsmeade weekend. Remus entered the dorm room quite noisily, allowing the door to slam. James sat up in bed, startled. Bloody hell! Oh, sorry, Remus cringed. I thought you'd be in Hogsmeade. We were going to. Sirius rolled over in his own bed, yawning, but our beds looked so comfortable. Damn, I didn't mean to sleep that long. James got up, stretching. I was going to slip Rosmerta a bit of cash for the Halloween fire whiskey too. Don't worry, I got Peter to do it, Sirius replied, lying on his back, making no sign that he planned to get up at all. Is it lunchtime? Yeah, Remus grinned, pleased to have his friends for an afternoon which he had expected to be very dull and lonely. Shall we go down? Let me shower first, James nodded, trailing sleepily towards the bathroom. And I really ought to start that Defense Against the Dark Arts essay on Patronuses. Have either of you done it? Drafted, Remus said, flicking through his own pile of homework. You can take a look if you want, but I bet you know it better than me anyway. Hardly had time for the reading, James shouted from inside the bathroom. He never shut the door and treated everywhere like a Quidditch locker room. With the game coming up and these prefect patrols, not that I'm complaining about those. Patronuses look really cool, though. I wanted to be the first one to do it. Remus didn't respond to this, but he thought James probably would be the first to cast a Patronus, not only because he was the best in the year at Dada, but, according to the books Remus had read so far anyway, it looked like you needed to be able to conjure up a happy thought at extremely short notice. James seemed the most likely to be able to do this. Remus thought he could probably manage it too, but maybe not very quickly. He made a mental note to give it some further thought before the practical lesson. "So, we've sorted the booze," Sirius was saying loudly, so that James could hear them over the water running. "Food is easy, and it'll be right after the feast anyway, so no one will be hungry except Mooney." "Up yours," Remus said blithely, settling onto his own bed, still trying to come up with happy thoughts. "Decorations," Sirius continued, smiling. "Well, I've asked Avni in Hufflepuff to do something creative with pumpkins, so we'll see how that goes. Then all we need is music. You'll do that again, won't you, Mooney?" Remus shrugged. "I could, but last time everyone just put on whatever they wanted anyway." He didn't want to admit that he wasn't particularly looking forward to the Halloween party. Not that he didn't love getting off his face on fire whiskey and watching James make a prat of himself on the dance floor. But he couldn't shake the memory of the last Gryffindor common room party and how that had ended for him. "That's fine," Sirius was reassuring him. "Just get them going for the first few tracks. Something they can dance to, this time." Remus smirked and raised an eyebrow. "You can dance to Pink Floyd if you try hard enough." "I know you have standards, but, Mary's asked if you could stick on some ABBA, maybe." Sirius asked this with a mild wince, as if it caused him physical pain. "Oh, Jesus!" Remus flopped back on his bed dramatically, throwing an arm over his face. "Spare me." Sirius laughed, which made even ABBA seem worth it. "Shit, Mary!" James shouted from the bathroom. Sirius frowned. "What?" he yelled back. James came running out of the bathroom, soaking wet and dripping onto the floorboards, a towel around his waist. "Mary," he said again, "you were supposed to treat her to a day out in Hogsmeade to make up for her birthday." "Oh, buggering fuck!" Sirius slapped his head, annoyed. "How do I keep forgetting?" "Not your fault, mate," James said, grabbing another towel to dry his hair, making it extra messy in the process. "You've been busy." Remus thought this was extremely charitable of James, and actually a bit of a lie, really. Sirius was the least busy of the Marauders. He hardly bothered with homework, he wasn't on the Quidditch team, did nothing at all extracurricular, and was taking less subjects even than Peter. Other than detentions and a dedicated commitment to practical jokes, Mary was Sirius's only other real concern. "Ah, well, she'll forgive me," Sirius sighed. "I'll take her out next time and really go mad on Valentine's Day." "That's months away," Remus reminded him. Sirius shrugged. James shook his head, putting his glasses on and rooting around in his dresser for clothes. "Your funeral, mate," he said. "You're going to lose that girl if you're not careful." Remus's heart skipped a beat. Chapter 98, 6th year, Halloween, Tuesday the 26th of October 1976. Boarding the Hogwarts Express in September, listening to David Bowie, listening to T-Rex, Christmas at the Potters, winning a game of chess, starting a new book, finishing a book, Grant's voice on the phone, a perfectly executed prank, beating Sirius at history, beating Sirius at anything, running through the forest at full pelt with Padfoot, Sirius Black's smile, snogging Sirius. "Oh, focus," Remus muttered angrily to himself as he stalked through the corridors towards the hospital wing. A group of first-year Slytherins who happened to be walking past jumped at his outburst, then scurried away, whispering. "Oh, great," Remus thought. "Bet Snape's already told them all about Loony Lupin. Talking to yourself will really help." He was on his way to his first study session with Madame Pumphrey and the students putting themselves forward for healer training and using the spare time to list all of his very happiest memories. Only one memory in particular kept interrupting. "If my Patronus is a black dog," he told himself, "I'll have to leave Hogwarts forever and never show my face again." "Hello, Remus, what are you doing here?" He had reached the hospital wing now and found Marlene waiting outside, smiling at him, clutching a large textbook to her chest. "Hiya," he smiled back. "I'm here for the healing lessons." Oh, wow. I had no idea you wanted to be a healer. She beamed. Well, yeah, I was just interested. How about you? Oh, yes, it's all I've ever wanted to be, she said proudly. Remus tried not to look too taken aback. That felt like the sort of thing he ought to know about his friends, but then Marlene had always been a bit more private than Lily or Mary. Secretly, Remus had always felt a special fondness for Marlene. She was quiet and shy, like he was, less abrasive than Mary and less bossy than Lily. He remembered once, in a moment of confusion at the age of 13, having decided to fancy her. That embarrassed him now, but he had a feeling that if he told her, she'd see the humour in it. Actually, now that he thought about it, Marlene had the inherent good nature and sensible attitude that probably suited a healer. Besides this, during Madame Pumphrey's lesson, Marlene was clearly the standout student. She seemed to know half the spells already, and the Mediwitch approvingly told her she had a natural gift. Marlene flushed with pride at this, and Remus realized that it was the first time he'd seen her so confident. She had always seemed too unsure of herself before. "Blimey, I should just start taking lessons from you," he said as they left the sick bay later that evening. "Oh, shut up," she grinned bashfully. "You'll be running rings around me once you've had the chance to catch up." "Doubt it," he nudged her. "Don't want to be a professional beater, then?" "Ha-ha, no chance," she laughed. "You should see the state my brother's in, and he's only been professional for a few years. Wouldn't mind being the healer for the Cannons, though. Or whatever team Potter gets drafted to, then I can still see you all after school finishes." "We'll see each other anyway," Remus said. "You can't get rid of us that easily." "You're a sweetie, Remus," she elbowed him. "Hey, I'm really looking forward to this party. Are the rumours true?" Halloween 1976 was due to fall on a Sunday, and due to the nature of the evening, Hogwarts students were given Monday off. This, in Sirius's mind, could not have been more perfect. The Marauders' parties had grown legendary in status, and there were whispers all over the castle speculating on what exactly the four boys might have in store. There was mention of copious amounts of alcohol, potential fireworks. Remus heard one Hufflepuff, who swore blind they had smuggled in a real band, instruments and all. "What do they think?" laughed James. "I'm hiding them under my bed. They might be right about the fireworks, though." "James," Remus groaned, "you're a prefect." "Exactly," he grinned, puffing out his chest, "and I have the authority to sanction any celebrations I see fit." Remus had tentatively prodded Lily on this statement, not wanting to get James into trouble, but equally not wanting to see her humiliated either. "Look, Remus, after 6 years I'm learning to just go with the flow as far as you lot are concerned," she said, not looking up from her arithmancy charts. "If Potter and Black want a party, they'll find a way. I'm just going to brush up on extinguishing spells and make sure no one gets hurt. Besides," and she did look up now, "I think everyone needs a bit of cheering up. The war, you know." So that was that then. If Lily Evans was okay with a party, Remus supposed that he would have to be as well. Besides, it was partly to celebrate Sirius's birthday too, which fell on the following Wednesday. And you had to be capable of superhuman cruelty to deprive Sirius Black of a birthday celebration. This was a sore spot with Mary, who had been forgotten about twice now and was rapidly losing patience with her flighty, easily distracted boyfriend. The problem was, she seemed to think that Remus was the best person to vent to about it. "I'm not an idiot," she sighed, a few days after forgiving Sirius for his latest slight, not after having charmed all of the goblets on the Gryffindor dining table to suddenly fling their contents into his face. "I knew what he was like before we started going out, and my auntie always says, 'You can't change a man.'" Remus replied, hoping this sounded caring and supportive. Evidently it did, because she carried right on talking. "And you know, I like the fact that he doesn't follow the rules, and he doesn't care what anyone thinks. I do just sort of wish he cared what I think." "I'm sure he does," Remus mumbled. "He doesn't show it, though, and actually he's not the only good-looking boy at Hogwarts." She said this with a wry look on her face as a tall Ravenclaw 7th year walked past them. Roman Rotherhide Remus had heard a lot of girls whispering about him. He had curly fair hair as long as Sirius's and dark brown eyes. Mary licked her lips, her own eyes following the older boy as he left the library. Remus slammed his book shut. "Shall we go?" Sunday, the 31st of October, 1976. The afternoon of the party, Remus was lying on his bed with the curtains drawn, listening to Diamond Dogs for the 100th time, trying to avoid all of the nonsense going on downstairs. The girls seemed to have joined forces and turned the usually comfortable, slightly worn around the edges, Gryffindor common room into a cross between a jumble sale and the Boots cosmetics counter. He could practically smell the perfume from his bed, and it made his nose itch. They were getting ready, Mary and Marlene had told him, though Remus couldn't see what that meant exactly, except that it seemed to involve a lot of mirrors, a lot of giggling, and an ungodly amount of hairspray. James was trying out new beaters for the Quidditch team, and Remus assumed Sirius was with him. Peter was helping Desi choose a dress for the party, though Remus suspected this was just a cover story. A glance at the Marauders map told him that Peter Pettigrew and Desdemona Lewis were alone in the prefect's bathroom. Alone and exiled from the common room, Remus had considered the library, but Christopher was there, and it looked like he was sitting close to the entrance. A novice error. You got far better light near the back by the windows, which meant that Remus would have to say hello, and Christopher would make some cold, shrugging reply, and eventually Remus was going to have to sort all of that out. But just now he wasn't in the bloody mood, okay? Feeling very sorry for himself, he reclined on the bed and raised his wand, lazily levitating the record out of its sleeve and onto the needle. He'd lugged the record player up from its usual spot on Sirius's shelf and sat it on the end of his bed, hoping that with the bed curtains drawn he could play it loud enough to drown out the high-pitched chatter drifting up the stairs. In the year of the scavenger, the season of the bitch, sachet on the boardwalk, scurry to the ditch. Just another future song for lonely little kids. Oh, hello. Sirius poked his head through the curtains. Remus sat up. "Hi," he replied uneasily, slightly embarrassed, as if he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't be. "Did you want your record player back?" "Nah," Sirius waved a hand. He opened the curtains further and, much to Remus's horror, climbed inside, crawling onto the bed. He settled down on his back beside Remus and listened to the record with him. They were quiet for a long while, both staring at the red canopy above them. Remus kept telling himself that Sirius was behaving perfectly normally. He lounged about on James's bed all the time. It meant nothing. Finally, much to his relief, Sirius spoke. "Broke up with Mary." "Ah, so that was all." Remus raised his eyebrows. "Really? Sorry about that, mate." He felt Sirius shrug beside him. "Nah, it's okay. Not like I was in love with her or anything. Plenty more fish in the sea." "Yeah," Sirius chuckled. They both fell quiet again. Bowie's thin, sharp voice rattled between them. The first song ended, and the thunderous swell of Sweet Thing began. "Love this track," Sirius commented. Remus murmured in agreement. "If you want it, boys, get it here thing, 'cause Hope Boys is a cheap thing. "We did it," Sirius said suddenly. "Me and Mary." "You did? Oh, when?" "Over the summer, once or twice since we've been back at Hogwarts." "Right, that's not why she dumped you." "No," Sirius scowled at him. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, but I don't think I was that terrible. We just broke up, that's all." "How was it?" "The breakup?" "No, how was it?" Sirius smiled enigmatically. "Oh yeah, it was good. Great. Not like I imagined, but yeah, good." "Well, good then." "She's really gorgeous, Mary." "Yeah, she is." "Then let it be. It's all I ever wanted. It's a street with a deal and a taste. It's got claws, it's got me, it's got you. Remember when we were kids and we were convinced Bowie was a wizard?" Sirius said. Remus smiled fondly at the memory. "Yeah, I think I still sort of believe he is. One day when we all live in London, we'll go and find him, and then we can ask." Remus burst out laughing. "What?" Sirius grinned back at him. "You can't just meet someone like Bowie." "Don't see why not. We could go to one of his gigs or find out where he lives. Have some imagination, Lupin. Once we're of age, we can do anything." Rebel Rebel started up next. It was practically Sirius's theme song by now. "Anything," Remus smirked. You already think you can do anything. Calling me arrogant. Sirius narrowed his eyes, sitting up. He was smiling. Remus smiled back. Going to deny it? He replied, Your ego is so big it has its own orbit. Harsh. Your ego is so big, Remus continued slyly. When you were doing it with Mary, you probably closed your eyes and imagined yourself. You wound me, Lupin. Sirius reached for a pillow and began to beat him with it. Remus kneed him in the shin, rolling over to try and stop Sirius's onslaught, but Sirius was quicker. Laughing, he clambered on top of Remus, forcing him down, holding his wrists over his head. Ha! He cheered, triumphant. Apologize. No. Remus cocked an eyebrow and struggled to get free. Sirius was straddling him now and braced himself against Remus's movements, pushing back down. You can't escape, Sirius said. I've got you, Mooney. Their eyes met and everything was different. Remus became acutely aware of the lack of space between them, every shape and angle of Sirius's body that was touching his own. He jerked upwards, deliberately, testing, and Sirius pushed back. Sirius, Remus whispered tentatively, hearing the catch in his own voice. What are we doing? Shh! Sirius shook his head. Shh! Sirius said again, leaning forward now, letting go of Remus's wrists. Just this! Just... His face was buried in the pillow next to them. Remus could hear his breathing quickening over the opening refrain of Rock and Roll with Me. You always were the one that knew. Okay, Remus whispered. We'll do this. If this was what Sirius wanted, Remus wasn't going to ask any more questions. He didn't think he had enough blood left in his brain to formulate a thought anyway. He was aching, straining with desire, and Sirius was pressing down on him, hitting the very parts of Remus that cared most for pressure. He pushed his hand between them, fumbled with the buttons on their jeans. Sirius stiffened slightly, but allowed it, letting Remus do everything, letting Remus touch him. He was momentarily shy about his body, how bony his body must seem, how awkward his hands. But soon there was no space left for shyness. Sirius kept moving, and Remus was lost, completely lost in the strange familiarity of another person and the gorgeous smell of Sirius's hair. It was over almost as quickly as it had begun. All it took was the right angle against Sirius's hip, and Remus gasped, twitching, seeing stars, and a second later Sirius let out a muffled cry into the bedsheets. In the quiet moments that followed, they lay breathless and tense. Then Sirius propped himself back up and climbed off, rolling over onto his back. They said nothing as they did up their trousers and straightened their clothes. Remus refused to be the first to speak. Got a bit carried away, Sirius said, clearing his throat. Remus blinked. Right, he swallowed dryly. Sorry. What? No, it's okay. Sirius looked awkward. Remus had never seen him look so out of his depth before. I'm going to have a shower. Not long until the feast. Right. Remus nodded again, watching Sirius carefully climb out of the bed and back through the curtains. He stopped and turned back quickly, looking slightly panicked. You won't tell anyone? Remus snorted and shook his head. As if I would. Sirius nodded and closed the curtain behind him. Remus flopped back on the bed, his mind still catching up. If he wasn't so confused, he'd be furious. Chapter 99, 6th year, parties and pustules. He's in love with rock and roll, whoa. He's in love with getting stoned, whoa. He's in love with Janie Jones, whoa. He don't like his boring job, no. And he knows what he'd like to do. He knows he's going to have fun with you. You lucky lady. Sunday the 31st of October, 1976. The 1976 Hogwarts Halloween feast was so terrible that Remus's first order of business immediately afterwards was to get as drunk as humanly possible. It wasn't terrible in any outward kind of way, of course. The food was delicious as usual, a glorious golden hog roast with apple crumble covered in goopy yellow custard for pudding. It was just terrible for Remus. Sirius wasn't rude or cold. He wasn't even trying to avoid Remus. It was exactly his dreadful dedication to normality that made it so awful. He smiled, he laughed, he joked. He called Remus his Mooney without a trace of shame. Remus had no choice but to follow his lead. After all, he'd promised not to tell. Mind you, he hadn't the first clue how you would tell somebody a thing like that. Oi, James, has Sirius ever sort of got into bed with you, and then you sort of ended up touching quite a bit? Oh, God, what if he had? There was also Lily, of course, the most sympathetic person Remus knew after James, though the thought of talking to a girl about that sort of thing was mortifying. Mary was the most sexually experienced person Remus knew, and he absolutely 100% could not talk to her about Sirius. Not that she'd have been upset. As the party got into full swing, Remus knocked back 3 shots of whiskey as soon as the opportunity presented. Mary descended from the girls' dorm dressed to kill in a very tight red dress, which made even Remus stare for a few seconds. Roman Rotherhide of Ravenclaw was first to offer her a drink, and the two spent the rest of the evening entirely absorbed in each other in one way or another. Remus skulked by the record player for a bit, deliberately putting on the most abrasive, least danceable records he could find. The Stooges' We Will Fall, swiftly followed by Sister Ray, then some Captain Beefheart for good measure. Eventually, he was overpowered by a group of fourth-year girls who ganged up on him, clutching David Cassidy and Bay City Rollers LPs. After that, he devoted himself to the punch bowl. Sirius was having a good time, obviously. He and James were gregarious hosts, as always, making the rounds like the good pure-blood heirs they were. The common room kept filling up as students came from all over the castle, and it got so warm that Remus ended up taking a bottle of witch's brew he'd topped up with whiskey, and sitting alone by the open window chain smoking. Marlene approached at some point to see if he was okay, and to ask if Sirius was seeing anyone else, now that he and Mary were over. Remus scowled at the hopeful look in her eyes and told her he didn't give a shit. She frowned but left him alone after that. At about 9 o'clock, things got really hazy. The last thing he remembered was Peter and Desdemona's pitch-perfect performance of Paradise by the Dashboard Light. Trust Peter to like Meatloaf out of all the Muggle music in the world. Remus vaguely remembered smiling stupidly as the pair of them flung each other about the room, red and sweating, but having the time of their lives, belting out the duet at the top of their lungs. You gotta do what you can, and let Mother Nature do the rest. Ain't no doubt about it. We were doubly blessed, 'cause we were barely 17, and we were barely dressed. The next thing Remus knew, he was in the dorm bathroom, bent over the toilet bowl, choking his guts out. He must have got there a bit late, because his shirt and trousers were wet and stinking. The room whirled and lurched, and he lay down on the soothing cold tiles as the closing bars of Rebel Rebel wafted up the stairs. Oi, Mooney, wakey, wakey, mate. James's voice boomed into his throbbing head a few hours later. No. Bloody hell, James sighed. Scourgify, come on, up you get, it's Padfoot's turn to puke. Remus blinked at the bright light and tried to crawl to his feet. Their bathroom was small to begin with, just room for a sink, toilet and bathtub. There wasn't really room for 3 lanky 16-year-old boys, 2 of whom were so drunk they could barely stand. Remus backed into the sink as Sirius flung himself at the toilet bowl, noisily throwing up. Luckily, his hair was tied back. Remus blinked again, staring dopily at him for a while before James gently yanked him up by the elbow. Come on, Mooney, me old pal, time for bed, eh? He mumbled, feeling childish and helpless. He allowed James to lead him out of the bathroom and towards his bed. Ugh! The sheets were still rumpled, and Sirius's record player was still perched precariously at the foot. James moved this as Remus clambered under the covers, still in his jeans and socks. Pfft, you were supposed to be the responsible one, James huffed jokily as he drew the bed curtains. Night-night, Mooney. James, Sirius whined from the bathroom. James tutted, and Remus closed his eyes. The hangover the next day was so horrendous, Remus thought he'd probably never drink again. Wednesday, the 10th of November, 1976. In the week that followed, Remus was completely on edge whenever Sirius was around. They weren't ever alone together, and it was hard to tell whether or not this had been engineered by Sirius, or whether it was just a consequence of being at boarding school. Certainly Remus made no effort to catch him alone. Who knew what might happen? There were plenty of explanations of this, he was certain. He just had to think about it. Perhaps Sirius was just up for it. They were both teenage boys, after all. Remus had been readily available, and hadn't put up any resistance. Perhaps this was the sort of thing rich boys did at boarding school, find a bit of rough to rub up against. It could even be a bit of Sirius's canine side coming out. The worst part was that Remus didn't actually care what the reason had been. He just wanted it to happen again. As guilty as he knew he ought to feel, he spent every night lying in his bed and wishing that Sirius would come creeping over, or that he, Remus, had the courage to get up and go to Sirius himself. But the courage never came, and after a week, which comprised Sirius's birthday, a Hogsmeade weekend, bonfire night and a full moon, Remus simply had to try and give up on it. As usual, when facing a crisis, Remus had composed a trusty list to help even out his thinking. This one was titled, Reasons to Forget the Sirius Situation. Sirius clearly wanted to pretend it had never happened. A good friend ought to respect his wishes. Remus wanted to be a good friend, because after all, losing a friend was potentially much worse than never touching Sirius again. Wasn't it? Sirius was making no bones about his deep and abiding attraction to girls. All girls, every girl. This last point was the most salient. A contributing factor to Remus's messy downfall at the Halloween party had been Sirius's dogged attempts to flirt with every girl in the room over 15. Extremely successful attempts. By the time the next weekend rolled around, it was common knowledge that Sirius was now casually seeing Avni Chowdhury, the Hufflepuff who had enchanted the pumpkins to glow in the dark. This was a familiar situation by now, and Remus was at least glad that he wasn't a prefect anymore and ran no risk of stumbling upon Sirius and Avni snogging in the astronomy tower. He did start avoiding the greenhouses, though. Life plodded on. Remus's study group slowly rebanded, sidling up to him one by one in the common room or the library, to politely inquire whether the seat next to him was taken, and then, once he had confirmed its availability, settling in and asking if he would mind just checking something for them, or giving his opinion on some point or other. Remus didn't mind. It was a good distraction, and much healthier than getting stoned, at least. Christopher did not join in, but Remus supposed he might just be busy with his owls. The third full moon of the year went just as well as the previous two. James swore he'd caught sight of a unicorn, really this time. And the lessons with Madame Pumphrey became an unexpected delight, to the point where Remus was now competent at healing minor abrasions and bruises. No more TCP for him. So really, he told himself repeatedly, he, Remus John Lupin, had no reason at all to be unhappy. Everything was as it should be. Even James and Lily were getting along without any hexes or curses being thrown. The emptiness was only inside him. His outer life was fuller than ever. In light of all of this, he was quite surprised to receive a letter one quiet afternoon in the library. Actually, received a letter might be overstating it. A paper aeroplane stabbed him in the back of his head while he was trying to concentrate on converting an Agrippan arithmetic equation into the Chaldean form. He hissed in pain and grabbed it, glaring around. He was alone, but he knew exactly who was to blame. James's locomotor charms were legendary. He unfolded it, smoothed it out, and began to read. Marauders assemble. We have lain dormant too long. And tonight, midnight, garden tapestry, mischief. He couldn't help but smile. They hadn't done a proper prank in ages. Thursday, the 11th of November, 1976, midnight. Who's that? It's me. Oh, hiya, Mooney. You found the cloak then. Sirius with you? I thought he was with you. Nah, I had patrol. What about Wormtail? He's here on my shoulder. We didn't fit otherwise. You two are making so much noise. Padfoot? Prongs. How did you get here without the cloak? I walked, you wuss. Lucky Filch didn't see you. I was born lucky. The garden tapestry was on the ground floor, only a few yards away from the entrance to the dungeons. From this, Remus had surmised that the prank would be aimed at Slytherin. He was not wrong. James had a very large wooden box with him, which he was propelling along with his patented locomotion charm. Some of the bubo tubers accidentally crossbred with some puffball mushrooms, he whispered as they crept down the stairs to the dungeons. Professor Sprout asked me to chuck them on the compost heap, but I thought that would be a waste. Where are we going to put them? Sirius whispered back excitedly. Well, I don't know this year's Slytherin password. Any of you? They all shook their heads, except for Peter, who, still perched on James's shoulder, gave a negative-sounding squeak. James sighed, only mildly disappointed. Then I thought we could probably just leave them scattered about a bit. They're just about ready to spore, I reckon. Once they had reached the dingy, cave-like lower levels of the castle, Peter transformed back into himself, and James set down his crate. He lifted the lid to present a bounty of at least 100 large, yellowish, gently pulsating mushrooms. Peter said. Yup, James grinned, lifting one carefully out of the box. It was about the size of a tennis ball. Don't squeeze them, they're full of pus and ready to blow. This is going to be excellent, Sirius grinned, reaching in and grabbing two. They quickly and efficiently began squirreling away the weird, pimplish fungus, behind sconces, over doorways, under carpets, and inside suits of armour. The puffball bubotuber hybrids were throbbing unpleasantly in their hands, and Remus thought James was right. They were ready to go off at any minute, leaving the dungeons covered in foul-smelling yellow pus. They had maybe half finished with the box when Remus's ears pricked. He had the strange sense he was being watched. Whirling around, he spotted the glowing yellow eyes of Mrs. Norris peering around the corner with that smug, spiteful look on her squashed face. "Shit," he whispered. "Quick, look." "Oh, bugger," James said. "You three take the cloak and hide, I'll—" "Who's there?" Filch's voice barked. "Quick!" James hissed, and began running in the opposite direction. Peter, Sirius and Remus looked at each other, before telepathically deciding to duck into the nearest open doorway, which just so happened to be the girls' loos. "That fucking cat has it in for me," Sirius muttered, "ever since I became an animagus." "You can talk," Peter replied testily, wringing his hands. Remus had dragged the box of mushrooms in behind them and was desperately looking for a place to hide it. "Push it in front of the door," Sirius said. "I don't think that will—" "Locomoto!" "No." Sirius was not as good at this charm as James. He always put a bit too much force behind it. It was all Remus could do to duck down and cover his head as the crate of delicate bubotuber puffballs slammed loudly into the bathroom door, setting off every last pustule with a sickening squelch. Peter disappeared completely, shrinking down to rat size at the very last moment and scuttling down the nearest drain for refuge. Sirius, ever confident in his abilities, simply stood there looking stupid as gallons and gallons of pus exploded in his face, coating the entire bathroom in the process. It was sometimes very easy not to idolize Sirius Black. Chapter 100, 6th Year Boundaries. I can't help from crying. "Oh no, boy, you ain't done nothing wrong. You just make me feel so good it hurts me, 'cause I've been without you so long. And now I got a good kind of hurt. Oh boy, you really make me come alive." Friday the 12th of November, 1976. They were caught, of course, just Sirius and Remus. Peter's quick thinking had got him out of it, and James had run fast enough in time. He wanted to tell McGonagall that the whole thing had been his idea, but Sirius wouldn't let him. Their head of house gave them one of the worst dressing-downs they'd had in years, made all the worse by the fact that she was clad in her tartan nightie and dressing down, which was not amusing in the slightest, but extremely terrifying. They stood in her office, heads hung, dripping pus, until she dismissed them to bed. 20 house points lost and detention until Christmas. "Ah, well. You both have an hour free before lunch tomorrow," she said as a parting barb. "I expect both of you to report to the dungeons in order to clean up your mess, without magic." Sirius was furious, and after he'd washed went to bed without another word. Pete sat on the end of his own bed, looking pale-faced and worried. "I'm really sorry," he whispered to Remus desperately. "I panicked. Sometimes I just lose control when I'm scared." "It's okay," Remus replied tiredly. "It's only detention." "Anyway," James piped up from his bed, "they didn't find any of the puffballs we hid yet." James was quite right, and in a sublime twist of fate, the bubotuber puffballs exploded early the next morning, just as most of the Slytherin students were on their way from the dungeons to the Great Hall for breakfast. So at least the evening had not been a complete waste of time. "It was you two," Lily stared at Remus, amazed, when he told her why he couldn't meet her in the library before lunch. "Not Black and Potter, Black and you." "Don't have to act that surprised," he frowned. "I'm capable of being an idiot as much as anyone else is." "No, but I thought you and Sirius were on the outs. Why would you think that?" "Oh, something Mary said, I suppose." "What did Mary say?" Remus felt a flare of heat shoot up his neck. Had Sirius told Mary something? Some stupid slip of the tongue while they were cozying up together? "I don't know." Lily looked mildly surprised. "Ask her. I can't really remember. I just thought she said something about the two of you not talking. Anyway, if you could please try not to destroy any more bathrooms this year. Gryffindor's got the lowest house points already, and it's not even Christmas." The surprise corridor attacks had lost 20 more house points from Gryffindor and an extra night's detention for Remus and Sirius. James was terribly guilty, but Sirius's sense of chivalry and honour got in the way, and he still wouldn't let him confess. Of course, it was a very different story later that day, when he and Remus were standing outside the cordoned-off bathroom, waiting for Filch to arrive with buckets and mops. "Bloody Wormtail, this is all his fault." "No, it isn't," Remus yawned, leaning against the wall. He hadn't had enough sleep. "The little twerp ran away like the vermin he is." "Hey, be nice," Remus frowned. "He only did that because someone got overexcited and blew up all those mushrooms." "I was thinking on my feet." Sirius raised his chin defiantly. "You weren't thinking at all." "Well, you weren't doing anything?" "I was trying to hide it. If we'd hidden the box and got under the cloak, no one would have got in trouble at all." "Well, you didn't say that at the time," Sirius snapped. "You didn't give me a chance." He still didn't have to run away. Sirius folded his arms, leaning against the opposite wall. Tired and grumpy, Remus spat back. "James ran away too. Don't see you cursing his name." Sirius glared at him furiously. How dare anyone speak against James Potter in the presence of Sirius Black? Remus rolled his eyes and stared at the ceiling until Filch arrived. Argus Filch was one of the most unpleasant adults Remus had ever met. Matron would have liked him. A bitter, spiteful, creeping man on the wrong side of middle age, Filch was a caretaker and a sneak who seemed to hate students more than anyone who worked in a school really ought to. This was never more evident than when he was permitted to administer detentions. He dropped 2 large wooden buckets at their feet with a malicious grin on his face and pushed the door open. Overnight, the pus seemed to have dried and left a thick yellowish crust over most of the surfaces it had hit. Remus wrinkled his nose. Filch handed them both mops and scrubbing brushes. "I'll be back to check on you on 2 hours," he said. "You ought to be done by then. No wands and no funny business." He sneered as he left them to it. Remus looked at Sirius, who was obviously still annoyed with him. He straightened his back. "I'll start over there." He nodded to the far end of the bathroom. "You go over there." He indicated the opposite end. "Fine?" Remus shrugged, lifting his bucket and filling it at the sink. Yes, actually, that was perfect. They'd keep to their own sides and just get this stupid thing over with. Sirius still wasn't talking to him and turned his back, working in silence. Remus followed suit. 2 could play at that game. Sirius was making it much easier. Remus would never admit it, but he didn't mind cleaning and actually found it quite satisfying. As disgusting as the pus looked, it came away from the white tile easily with a bit of soap and water, so the work wasn't too physically taxing until it came to wiping down the walls. This was harder just because of all the reaching and stretching, which tired him out and made his shoulders ache. Additionally, buba-tuba pus wasn't actually pus. According to the herbology textbook, Remus had skimmed in a hurry before turning up to clean it, in that it wasn't dirty or toxic. In fact, it had several healing properties, and while this gunk was from an accidental crossbred strain, it probably couldn't do any more harm than pumpkin juice. The little bathroom was eerily quiet, with the 2 boys silently working and only the occasional sloshing sound of them filling up their buckets or swabbing the floor. Remus didn't mind the cold atmosphere either. It actually helped him concentrate. He had known for a long time that his feelings for Sirius rarely got in the way of his ability to be irritated by Sirius. By the time the first hour was up, they had managed to remove all trace of the mess, and all that was left to do was a final rinse down. Remus rinsed his bucket a few more times and took the opportunity to wash his hands and his face, which had grown hot from exertion. Sirius joined him at the sink, but they didn't speak. "Nearly finished," Remus tried tentatively. Sirius snorted, annoyed. "No thanks to Wormt." "Shut up about Wormtail, will you?" Remus said, exasperated. "Grow up!" Sirius frowned and said nothing. He washed his hands and face too. Remus tried not to watch. He turned back to his own wall and began squeezing clear water across it, wiping away what was left of the soap suds. A shadow appeared at his shoulder, and he braced himself for more bickering. "You missed a bit," Sirius huffed grumpily, elbowing Remus out of the way and scrubbing it himself. Affronted, Remus scowled back at him. "Thought we were sticking to our own sides. Yeah, thought you could be trusted to do a decent job." "If I didn't have you breathing down my neck the whole time—" "You're so sensitive," Sirius snapped. "Nah, you're just acting like a prick." Remus elbowed him, harder than he really meant to. Sirius shoved him against the wall, and Remus slipped, grabbing Sirius to steady himself. Furious, he pushed him back. "Wanker," he said. Sirius kissed him. Sirius kissed like nobody else, languid, firm, and unhurried. Remus responded instantly, hands fisting the material of Sirius's shirt, wanting to run his fingers through the other boy's hair. But Sirius broke away before he could, stepping back, looking horrified with himself. His lips were pink and shining, slightly parted. Remus had to look away. "Remus, I'm sorry. I don't know what keeps happening to me." "It's okay," Remus said, not meeting his eyes. "You know, I'm not a—" "Yeah," Remus said. "Yeah, of course. Me neither." He said it quickly and without thinking. He said it to stop Sirius saying that word. They were quiet for a bit more. Remus's heart was racing. He could hardly think straight. He reached out, catching the thin white fabric of Sirius's shirt between his fingers and tugging it slightly, finally meeting Sirius's eyes. "No one's gonna find out," Remus said quietly, echoing something he had been told once. Sirius gazed back at him, his eyes burning. "You won't say anything?" Remus shook his head as Sirius came a little closer. Remus continued, braver now. "I won't. We don't have to stop, unless you want to—" Sirius kissed him, full on the mouth again. They both knew they had crossed a line, but it couldn't be helped now, and it was so good. And their bodies were hard against each other, hands fumbling with belt buckles, as if they'd known this was the plan all along. Once it was over, they clung to each other for long, exhausted seconds. Then Sirius withdrew carefully, stepping back. Remus longed to pull him close again, to never stop. He touched Sirius's hair one last time, pretending to push it back into place. They stared into each other's eyes, bold and unashamed for a few short seconds. "You're lovely," Sirius said so softly. Remus could only smile back gently. He didn't know what to say. The room had grown cold. "Come on," Sirius started buttoning his trousers, looking away finally. "We'd better finish this cleaning." Remus nodded, still mute, unable to do much more than lean back against the wall as he watched Sirius wash his hands again and pick up his mop. The sight of him walking away was too familiar, and Remus burst out, "Don't run off this time." Sirius looked back, a bit surprised and a bit something else. "I'm not going anywhere, Mooney." He spoke gently. "Oh, okay, good then. I felt bad about that last time, sorry." He was on the other side of the room now, and maybe that made it easier to talk. "But I thought you'd be angry or something." "I don't know." "No, I wasn't. We're still friends, aren't we?" "Of course, we'll always be friends, Padfoot." Remus was making a promise, though his brain was too foggy to really recognize it at the time. Sirius had acknowledged, however shyly, that whatever kept happening was probably going to happen again. He had assumed the role he always did, impulsive, expectant, and irresponsible. For his part, Remus took up his own mantle, the one who would be responsible. He would keep the secrets. He would accept what he was given. He would be responsible. If those are the things he needs, Remus decided, then those are the things I can give him. It was nothing at all. Brave, Sirius had called him once in another bathroom not so long ago. Remus hadn't known then whether or not he was, really, but he had liked the sound of it at the time, and he liked it even more now. Now, with the taste of Sirius still on his lips and the echoes of pleasure still settling in his body. As he watched Sirius finish sluicing down the far wall, encouraging the water down the drain with his mop and glancing up to smile now and then, Remus realized that what he had been waiting for all this time was for Sirius to be brave. What occurred to him now, with the clarity of a lightning bolt, was that he, Remus, could be brave for both of them.